and wounded, and those whom fought were exhausted. Jasper could see an exhausted and blooded Robar impale Dorolf through his shoulder with his sword. At the death of their leader, a great shout of fury erupted from the hill tribesmen, their morale no longer sapped by the numbers and equipment of their opponents. They now fought harder and to the death. Jasper turned to the axeman, whom had seen what was going on. He chopped his axe down onto Jasper. Jasper blocked the blow, but saw how the axe fell to the ground, followed by the clatter of Jasper's blooded sword. Jasper punched the axeman hard in the face before he got to the ground and grabbed a dead knight's sword. He cut down onto the shaft of the axe, snapping it in two. He turned to Jasper and ran at him, tackling him to the ground. "Fucking lowland scum," he screamed as Jasper felt his huge frame crushing him down, in spite of his steel plate armor. He punched Jasper hard in the face before he was thrown off from Jasper. Jasper looked up to see John, his younger brother, wielding only his shield, splattered with blood. "Get out of here, Jasper," he shouted as he reached for Jasper's hand. Jasper grabbed his hand and was pulled up. Jasper stood up and ran with John, when he realized how all three armies were taking up defensive positions. Jasper and John ran to Harold's side as he stood in front of their army, cut a few times on the face, wielding his now battered shield and his half-broken sword, pointing at the enemy as they gathered into a large circle. Jasper panted as he looked to Harold. "What now? Do we let them go that we might fight another day? Or do we continue fighting? Because this will only end with the deaths of what's left of them and thousands of what is left of us." Harold threw down his shield. He impaled his sword onto the blooded soil. He ignored Jasper, Albar and Ander as he walked toward the enemy, holding his empty hands up for them to see. "Who commands you?" There was no answer as all eyes looked to him as he stepped closer toward them. "I ask again, who commands you?" This time, a man Jasper recognized as the axeman he fought, stepped out of the circle and took a few steps toward Harold, but still a stone's throw away from him. "Our leader, Dorolf, is dead. I fought for him as his second," he said. "And you are?" "I am Shagger, son of Dolf, of the Stone Crows." "Who are you, Lowlander?" "I am Harold, son of John, of House Arincoma," he replied. "What do you want to talk about, Harold, son of John?" he demanded. "Peace." "What? Peace? With them? They know nothing of the word. Peace. Why would you want to talk of such a thing? It was your people whom invaded our lands many years ago. It was the Andals and 7 worshipping cunts whom stole our lands and murdered my people and forced us into these hills. Why should we trust your word?" he demanded. Jasper looked fearfully at Harold. "Get back, Harold. Get back. We have all lost this day. Many brave men have died in this war which has lasted a great many years, as you have said, Shagger, son of Dolf. But there must be peace, for the sake of our children and the sake of this land, which we all love," he replied. His words seemed to have impressed Shagger, for he took a few more steps towards Harold. "What do you propose?" he demanded. "For you and your leaders to meet with me in the Uri. As long as you do not attack any village, none of my bannermen shall dare attack you." Chapter 24, Making Peace with an Old Enemy. Chapter text. Daenerys 4. "You were right, Dany," he said. Daenerys was sad at seeing Harry like this. He was wounded thrice on his face, a sword scar across his cheek, an arrow wound across his temple and a punch had split his upper lip. "I used to think that battle and war were all so glorious. But all I saw was death, of boys and men. The first I killed was a boy, he looked younger than I. He looked so scared as he lay on the ground, bleeding and dying before I stabbed him once again," he said as he sat across from her in their chambers. Daenerys remembered seeing Uncle Ned, Artos, Brandon, Ulrich, Deanna, Theon and Aegon like this when they had all returned from Winterfell at the end of the War of the Long Night. She stood up and walked toward him before sitting down beside him. She leant in and rested her arm on his shoulder. "It's okay, Harry. I promise, everything will be okay," she whispered before hugging him. He nodded as he held on to her. Daenerys remembered how just before he left for Iron Oaks, he had told her how he would return victorious from the fighting. But then she had said, "Be careful, Harry. And remember, they might be wildlings and savages, but they also all have wives and children." They are not monsters. They still are men. She had hoped that he would try and do for the hill tribes what Uncle Ned had done for the free folk beyond the wall. She knew that the fighting between the Valaman and the hill tribes had been going on ever since the Andal invasions, thousands of years ago, when the Arins had conquered the Vale from the Royces and built the Uri and forced the last remnants of resisting First Men into the hills. As Harry climbed into bed, Daenerys stood up and was about to walk away. But then she turned back around and she saw how sad and scared he looked as he closed his eyes. Daenerys stepped toward him and took her nightdress off and climbed into bed next to him. "I'm right here, Harry. I'm right here," she whispered before kissing his forehead and hugging him. The next morning, Daenerys and Harry walked together to break their fast with Lysa and the lords and ladies of the Vale. Soon after breakfast, the two were joined by the tribal leaders, led by Shagga, son of Dolph. Looking at them, Daenerys failed to not see any differences between they and the free folk, or even the Scargasi or clansmen of the northern mountains. "Shagga, I know whom you are, but I do not know whom else joins us here," said Harry from his throne whilst Daenerys sat next to him on his right and then Lysa stood next to him on his left. Shagga gestured to the 9 other tribal leaders. "These are Chella, daughter of Shake, of the Black Ears. Tymet, son of Tymet, of the Burned Men. Stadar, son of Steruk, of the Howlers. Brera, daughter of Dagger, of the Milk Snakes. Ulf, son of Umar, of the Moon Brothers. Dorg, son of Crammer, of the Painted Dogs. Arava, son of Gronthor, of the Redsmiths. Degai, daughter of Urus, of the Sons of the Mist. And Jonthor, son of Tidar, of the Sons of the Tree. You invited us here, Lowlander. Now, what peace do you offer us?" asked Chella. "One of us living side by side," said Harry. "And why should we trust you? We've been taken fools before by fancy-dressed lords and knights before." "Are you the same?" asked Tymet. "No," he said. "And why should we believe you?" demanded Ulf. "Because he has seen you all fight that day at Iron Oaks, honored guests. You all fought with courage and stubbornness. Qualities we respect. And it is because of that we bring this offer to you," said Daenerys. Harry and her good mother turned to her as Daenerys prepared herself for this. "Mother, watch over me. Gods, new and old, watch over me," she inwardly prayed. Daenerys gestured to the gardens outside and pointed at the weirwood trees and the heart tree which she had sometimes prayed at. "I swear by the gods of old that you weren't invited under false pretenses. You were invited to end the ceaseless fighting that has come to these beautiful hills, mountains and vales which we all call home," said Daenerys. Her mention of the old gods, she was glad to see, changed their expressions from paranoid and indifferent to serious and resolute. "Go on," said Shagga. "It is true that the Andals came to the Vale thousands of years ago, forcing their faith upon the First Men, stealing their lands and their homes and forcing the bravest of the First Men into exile, for daring to fight to defend what was theirs. I know that better than any, for it was my family that conquered all kingdoms of Westeros nearly 300 years ago. But now is the time for peace, for all in the Vale, whether Highlander or Lowlander, Andals or First Men, we have all loved and lost. But from this day forth, my husband and I promise that must end. But it can only end with your help." As Daenerys sat back down, they calmed down and faced Harry. "What do you offer?" asked Shagga. Daenerys noticed he didn't call him Lowlander or curse at him. "Thank you, Mother," Daenerys thought as she rubbed her fingers over Mother's bracelet. "For you to keep your lands in the hills and mountains. Trading caravans shall come to your villages and towns and bring what goods you need, such as weapons, armaments, food, drink, clothing and supplies. We will also build better homes for you all, that your people would never suffer in times of winter," he offered. "In exchange for what?" asked Chella. "That you never fight a battle against fellow Valaman, travelers, caravans, convoys, villages or towns unless provoked, that you take up arms against all enemies of the Vale and accept my rule as Lord of the Vale and House Arryn's rule over the Vale," he replied. "You would have us kneel to you, after all that you have done to us over the centuries," snarled Degai. "Shut up." Shagga snapped at the chieftainess of the Sons of the Mist. "Good, he, if not the rest, should be swayed by what we offered." Shagga gathered them into a huddle and they whispered amongst each other. Daenerys turned to Harry, whom looked relieved. She smiled at him and held his hand. He looked surprised at how she held his hand and then rubbed his thumb over her hand, whilst shyly smiling at her. They let go when they broke from their huddle and turned around to them. "We accept." "But, I have one question," said Shagger. "Ask away," said Daenerys. "How soon will work begin on our homes to improve upon them?" he asked. "As soon as possible." "Of that, you have my word." "I swear, by the gods," new and old Harry replied. Harry stood from his throne and walked toward them and offered his hand. They each shook his hand. "We've done it. We've actually done it. We've ended the fighting with the hill tribes after thousands of years." Ashura 7. "Gods, I haven't missed the stench," Ashura thought as she looked out of the balcony of the Tower of the Hand and onto the city. It had been 9 and 10 years since she had left King's Landing with Ned, Elia, Artos, Rhaenys, Aegon, Daenerys and the Northern Army. And since she had arrived, she was disappointed. The rebellion is described as the rebellion which liberated Westeros from the yoke of the tyranny of Aes the Mad and the decadence of Targaryen dynasty. But who is to liberate Westeros from the corruption and laziness of the Baratheon Lannister dynasty? Ashura wondered. She still had numerous friends and associates in King's Landing from when she had served as lady-in-waiting to Elia. And since their return to the capital, they had told her of how the Lannister soldiers in the city nearly numbered half of the Gold Cloaks, and how they were impossible to miss in the Red Keep. And it was the Red Cloaks of Lannisport whom enforced their own rules on the streets and how small folk ran at the very sight of them. And then, Ned had told her truly worrying news. "The treasury is completely bankrupt," he had said during dinner. "What in the seven hells? Bankrupt? How is that possible? When Aes was king, there was millions in the treasury," said Ashura. "In these past 9 and 10 years, Robert has bankrupted the realm to finance wars, tourneys, feasts and hunts, whether big or small," Ned explained angrily. "And we owe millions. To Tywin Lannister, to Mace Tyrell, to the High Septon and worst of all, the Iron Bank of Bravos. Gods, Aes was mad enough to burn people for pleasure and see plots in every shadow, but even he would know better than to borrow from the dreaded Iron Bank." "Have you explained this to Robert?" she asked. "Robert refuses to listen. All he wants is to watch the tourney he is hosting in my name. I never wanted it in the first place, not to be hand and certainly not this damned tourney," Ned replied angrily. "Renly Baratheon says that there is no denying Robert of his fun, for not even Jon Arryn could do that," he continued as he calmed down. "Gods, the realm truly has gone to shit. How could we not have known just how bad this had all become in Winterfell?" "What have your old friends told you?" Ned asked. "The Gold Cloaks under the command of Janos Slynt have become corrupt and they are notorious for extortion from shopkeepers and businesses and stealing from small folk. The most recent example was when Janos Slynt killed a thief whom robbed a butcher of his earnings, only to pocket that coin for himself." Ned sighed as he buried his head in his hands. "What do we do, Ash?" Ned asked fearfully. Even though she couldn't see his face, she knew his voice well enough to know that he was afraid of the enormous pressure and responsibilities dumped on him by a man he once considered his brother in all but blood. "First, we get through this nightmare of a tourney and ensure it all passes without incident," said Ashura. Ned nodded as he sat back up, sighing as he did so and wiping the sweat from his face. "And then, we focus on each of the city's problems, one at a time. If we try and focus on them all at once, then we may find ourselves overwhelmed," she continued. "Yes," Ned agreed. "Was there anything else?" she asked. Something that Jon Arryn had done before he died. He had asked for a book on the great houses of the realm. A book on the houses of Westeros. "Why?" she asked. "I know not, neither did Pycelle," said Ned as he shrugged. "But he did mention how in recent moons, before Jon Arryn's death, Robert had left a great many bastards across the city, from whores, maidservants and small folk, and all had been taken by Robert's youngest brother, Algerdus. Algerdus Baratheon, the Lord of Summerhall whom became a sellsword," Ashura thought as she remembered how Robert taunted Daenerys, Rhaenys and Aegon in Winterfell over his killing of Viserys. "Why did he?" asked Ashura. "Apparently, Robert wanted them to be taken care of and Algerdus took them with him to Storm's End and then on to Summerhall," he explained. "Sounds like Oberyn and how he brought all of his daughters home with him to Sunspear," Ashura commented. I was just thinking that," Ned said with a nod. "So, what will you focus on first, once the tourney is over? Asked Ashura. The economy and paying off the crown's debts, to the Lannisters, Tyrells and High Septon first, before focusing on the Iron Bank, said Ned. Algada's 9. The celebrations in Volantis far dwarfed the ones held at the Prince's Palace in Pentos, Algada's concluded as he looked around Palace Magi. I pray that all contracts we take end in celebrations as grand and fucking magnificent as these, said Robin as he took a cup filled with wine before drinking it. Gods, this wine is fucking delicious. What wine is this? He asked the slave whom had the tray of wine cups. Yetish wine, my lord, he replied with a bow. Yeti. Uncle, what are the chances of the company getting hired to do some work in the Golden Empire? Asked Edric. Algrida turned to Herodas, whom shook his head. Unlikely. From what merchants I've spoken to, the Yetish have recently finished a campaign against a usurper and against the Jogosnai, said Herodas. Jogosnai, wondered Torwin. A nomadic people, very much like the Dothraki. They've been plaguing the Yetish for thousands of years, again like the Dothraki do to the free cities and to Slavers Bay, Herodas explained. Don't worry, lads. There will be plenty of contracts for the company, especially now that we are gaining well-deserved fame and more men join the company, said Algada's. But with more men, that does mean that it will be more costly for us, said Herodas. What do you mean? Asked Tolas. For every man in the company, they will need to be provided weapons, equipment, training and wages, Herodas explained. If we can survive this celebration feast without any more of my brother's enemies, then I will be a happy man. Algada's looked around and spotted Joranos Magi, whom had finished speaking with his father, whom was now speaking with his fellow members of the Tigers. Joranos, said Algada's. Lord Baratheon, he replied, turning to Algada's. Do you know if your father will have any further need of the company? I ask because I heard a rumor of a campaign into the Dothraki Sea, said Algada's. I'm afraid not, no. You see, my lord, father wants to conquer Dothraki lands for Volantis and build new towns and cities. It would be menial work for Storm Company, when the Dothraki have suffered losses that they've never endured before, he explained. And this leaves the company without a benefactor nor a place to call home, Algada's thought as he realized what this meant for Storm Company. Though you shouldn't fear, my lord, if it is work you desire, he said. Why is that, young Magi? Well, in case you haven't noticed, there have been an influx of Valyrian warlords conquering their own kingdoms across the world. There is Aegai Rugaria whom conquered the Summerelves less than 2 years ago. And now, one of my childhood friends is intent on conquering Slavers Bay, he replied. He's right. At this age of Valyrian warlords across the world, thinking themselves to be the next Aegon the Conqueror, there will be plenty of work for the company to make coin and possibly have a home to call our own for when we are not on contract. His desire now for the company to have a home came from the fact that Storm Company now contained 5,500 men, 3,000 infantry, 1,500 cavalry and 1,000 archers. At least a third of his men were all veterans of the fighting with Bravos and then with the Dothraki. Whilst the rest were all experienced sellswords, unemployed soldiers with no war to fight or young men eager to make their fortune in war as a sellsword in what had become the most renowned sellsword company in Essos. Algada's had now earned a reputation as a brilliant commander. The Volantens whom had known nothing but defeat at the hands of the Dothraki and the Pentoshi whom had known nothing but defeat at the hands of the Bravosi all had told tales of how it was him whom had won their battles for them. But, for Algada's, what mattered most of all for him now was the most recent letter he had received from Shireen. She had said that with the most recent arrival of coin, she had been able to complete the barracks, stable, smith and guardhouse of Summerhall. Now works were underway to complete a September, tourney grounds, an artisan's store, a marketplace, an armory, a training yard, a warehouse, a fishery, a hunting lodge, a lumber yard, a mine after copper was discovered in a nearby hill, a feasting hall, a glass house, an arbor, a treasury, a workshop and a counting house. Works in the interior of the keep had been completed, with banners of House Baratheon of Summerhall decorating all around the keep as well as Algada's personal hunting trophies and tapestries. Also work was underway for the completion of watchtowers, the gatehouse and the barracks of the keep, as well as finishing the complete repairs of the walls of the keep itself. Chapter 25, A Dangerous Competition. Chapter Text. Artos v. Artos hugged and kissed Rhaenys at hearing the news they had just received from Maester Jellimund. Do you know how long before I will give birth, Maester? Asked Rhaenys. In 6 moons at the earliest and 7 at the latest, my lady, he replied before returning to his desk. He held up numerous letters. Has your Ravenry been this filled with letters, Maester? Artois asked in surprise. No, my lord, it has not, he replied before passing the first one. Artois smiled when he recognized the seal of the hand of the king. Father as hand of the king to a man whom hates father's daughter and mother to father's own grandson and soon-to-be-born grandchild, Artois thought as he remembered King Robert with scorn for how he treated Rhaenys, Daenerys and Aegon. Artois broke the seal and opened the letter. Rhaenys and Artois read the letter together. To Artois, Lord of Winterfell. My son, the city has not changed at all since I was last here in this god-forsaken rat's nest they call a capital. Though Robert's negligence as king has filled the city with corruption. We are all well as can be expected here. I pray that the same can be said for you all in Winterfell. I ask that you send Master Theofred Haukel to King's Landing that he might begin construction of some sewers here and perhaps even an aqueduct. Give our best to Elia, to Rhaenys, to Aegon, to Rickon and to your little Rickard. I love you very much and am very proud of you. Father. It stinks still in the capital. Then why has no king ever done a thing about it? Are their noses so high in the Red Keep that they cannot smell the squalor in their precious capital? Is this why the Southerners hate the North so much? Because at least in the North, it doesn't stink. Maester, send for Master Theofred. It would seem the capital is in dire need of his talents, said Artois as he showed him the letter. I shall find him, my lord, he replied before leaving his solar. What about the other letters? Asked Rhaenys. Artois opened the second and smiled when he recognized the unfamiliar seal, a sigil of the reindeer of House Kelstark. From Ulrich Kelstark, he said, showing her the seal. From third son to now lord of his own house, she said with a smile as she recognized the sigil. Artois broke the seal and read the letter. Artois. Dearest brother, it would be nice for you and for Rhaenys to come to Moat Cailin. It is beautiful here with the towers all repaired and the rest all either built or nearing completion. But in ever better news, Jane is 4 moons away from giving birth to our first child. Be sure to bring this news to Veon and to Sigfrith. Jane misses her parents dearly and wants them there to greet their grandchild. Yours sincerely. Ulrich Kelstark, Lord of Moat Cailin. I'll be sure to pass on the good news to Veon, said Rhaenys as she held Artois' hand. Will we visit them at Moat Cailin? She wondered. Artois then had a thought. No. We shall host a feast in Winterfell and welcome all bannermen of Winterfell from the Nectarthon Valley. It will be good for us to celebrate how far we've come since the end of the war, to see how Rickon is doing as a ward of the Marndaelis and to personally congratulate Ulrich and Jane, said Artois. Garlan too. Garlan. Brother. Loras exclaimed when he saw Garlan and Leonette enter into the Red Keep. Loras. You are looking fit and ready for the tourney, said Garlan as they hugged. I am, and for the prize 40,000 gold dragons. Loras said, drunk on excitement. 40,000. Gods, I could do with that sort of coin. Garlan replied. What? I thought that father would have given you both plenty of coin to begin your steps as Lord and Lady of Whitegrove, asked Loras. You would think that, Loras, but no. There seems to be no end of things to spend on in Whitegrove. And I thought that it would all be easy, said Leonette. So what brings you to King's Landing, brother? Did you come to compete in the melee? Asked Loras. No, brother. Father wants one son to be earning glory on the tourney lists and on the battlefield. That will always be you, never me, I'm afraid, said Garlan with a grin. True enough. But why come then? Loras wondered. Grandmother wants me to get information on our dear sister's competition in Lyanna Stark here in the capital, Garlan explained. Oh, I see. Well, I'm afraid I haven't seen much of the Starks. The only Stark I've seen is Brandon, who is a fair hand with a battle axe, it must be said. But the new hand of the king has been thinking how to pay off the king's debts, said Loras. Including the one to House Tyrell, asked Garlan. Well, Renly says that is the one he's working on right now, having already paid off a significant debt to the High Septon, replied Loras. Gods, King Robert has borrowed from the High Septon himself. Since when has the High Septon been a moneylender for the Iron Throne? When is the first day of the tourney? Asked Garlon. Tomorrow. I shall be jousting against Sir Oswald, he replied excitedly, no doubt excited at jousting against a storied knight of the Kingsguard. Are you still eager to be in the Kingsguard? Asked Garlon. I'd be happier in the Kingsguard. I wouldn't be forced to wed or to be lord of somewhere, Loras explained. Loras escorted Garlon and Leonette to the lodgings Renly had lent them for the duration of their stay. Garlon was eager for them to complete the scouting mission grandmother and father had sent them on, so that they would return home and continue with the ceaseless work they had on their hands as the Lord and Lady of Whitehair Grove. On the tourney list, Garlon sat with Renly, whom was seated in the royal box. What do you think, Leonette? Garlon asked. It's very grand here, but not quite as magnificent as the tourneys your father hosts in Highgarden, she said. No, definitely. I think if you said that to him, he may just blush, said Garlon, at which she giggled. All rise for his grace, Robert, the first of his name, King of the Andals, the Roiner and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, announced a herald. All in the nobility stands and the royal box stood as King Robert, Queen Cersei, their children and the hand of the king walked to the royal box and sat down. That's the king. Leonette wondered, a little too loudly. He's let victory and celebration get to his head since the end of the Greyjoy rebellion, Garlon jested. Her grace is very beautiful. Though I can see that she doesn't enjoy being here, she commented. Really? What makes you say that? Asked Garlon. Look at how she smiles. She looks as though she is impatient for this all to be over. Very unlike how Margaery smiles, she replied. True. Though that would be grandmother's doing and how she wants her to be the perfect queen. But if Garlon thought that the queen was good at hiding how she felt about the tourney, the hand of the king clearly had no qualms about showing his feelings for it for all the world to see. The hand looks less savage than the stories would have us believe about the Northerners, Leonette commented. True. But having said that, Uncle Baelor spoke very highly about how brave Lord Stark was when he stood up to the king and Tywin Lannister and defended Elia Martell and the Targaryen children, said Garlon. Why would your Uncle Baelor speak so highly about that? Asked Leonette. Because he has long been in love with Elia Martell, even after she married Rhaegar Targaryen and after he had married Aunt Rhonda. I think they still exchange letters, Garlon replied. Then Garlon turned his eyes to the two princes and to the princess. The crown prince looks handsome, but arrogant, said Leonette. He looks too much like a Lannister. Arrogant and supercilious and above all others as though he was a god, Garlon commented. Are we sure that Margaery would be a good match for him? He doesn't strike me as the chivalrous or honorable type, said Leonette. Nor me, Garlon agreed. Gods, she is so beautiful. Leonette suddenly blurted out. What? Who? Garlon turned his head to the girl following behind the hand of the king and his wife. She was tall, graceful, with raven black hair reaching down to her waist, wearing a violet and grey dress and with hauntingly beautiful violet eyes. Lyanna Stark. What were your Lord Father's exact words? Leonette asked as she turned back to Garlon. His exact words were no northern savage would outshine the Rose of Highgarden. However, I think the nickname, the Star of the North, doesn't do her any justice, replied Garlon as he sighed in annoyance at father's choice of words. So, Margaery will have strong competition from her then, said Leonette. Very much so. But, we may just find out how she feels about the Crown Prince himself, added Garlon, just as Loras and Oswell rode onto the tourney grounds. Aegon 7. Aegon finished his letter to Lyanna and sealed it with the seal of House Targaryen, which mother had brought back with her from King's Landing, that day that they left, never to return again. Aegon sealed the letter, and then he looked at the fireplace, where he had thrown numerous parchments with the same message for Lyanna, until he had changed his mind about something in it. He left his chambers and walked to Maester Jellimon's solar, where he saw him giving Rhaenys a few vials. Add a few to every meal, my lady, and it should dull the pain until the next meal, he said. Thank you, Maester, said Rhaenys. May I help you, my prince? Asked Maester Jellimond upon looking up and seeing Aegon. If you could send this letter to King's Landing, please. Aegon asked, holding up the letter. Of course, my prince, he said before Aegon passed the letter and Aegon left the solar with Rhaenys. So, whom is the letter for, brother? Brandon? Or for a beautiful northern maiden? Asked Rhaenys with a teasing smile. The latter Aegon replied, blushing as he said it, and looking down at his feet as he felt the embarrassment of saying it out loud. Brother, it's all right, she said as she rubbed her hand over his back. Truly. Because at times I just feel so weak and so pathetic, Aegon said angrily, feeling the anger towards himself. No, Aegon, she said, her voice now serious. Brother, there is nothing wrong with love. It is in love that we find our strength. I found that with Artos and with Ricard and my next little one, she said as she held her hand to her growing belly. I know that it is hard. Lyanna could be wed to Joffrey, but I feel that she won't, she said. What makes you so certain? Asked Aegon. Because she knows what he is really like. And she is no fool to be taken in by a cruel and spoiled little prick like some stupid southern maidens. Uncle Ned and Aunt Ash promised her that if he showed the slightest sign of cruelty to her, they would break everything off and she would return to Winterfell. And even so, she has Brandon protecting her. And she has Arya protecting her also, said Rhaenys. Aegon nodded, understanding what she was saying. Thank you, sister, he said. I'm here for you, brother. As always. I promise, she said before pulling him in for a hug. Now, while I'm taking Maester Jellimon's medicine, can you be a good uncle to your handsome little nephew and take care of him? Of course. Anything for my handsome nephew. Aegon liked spending time with Ricard. Growing up, whenever he had felt upset with how he was being treated because of his Targaryen heritage, he found comfort in spending time with Farlin's dogs in the kennels by feeding them or taking them for walks, or he would play with Arya or Rickon alongside old Nan when they were newly born babes when they were in the nursery. He found the nursery and saw Ricard hugging his tiny toy, a fluffy little wolf. Hello. Hello, Ricard, Aegon whispered with a beaming smile. He picked him up from his crib and sat on the chair that old Nan would sit on when playing with the children or reading them stories. Do you like your little friend? Do you? Aegon asked. Ricard smiled cheekily as he held up his toy and waved it around before passing it to him. Oh, thank you so much, Ricard. Such a good boy. Now, you'll be a good boy to your mother and father, won't you? Aegon asked. Ricard made a cute little noise, starting with the letter N. Was that a no? You cheeky little boy. You're a very cheeky boy, aren't you? Aegon asked with a beaming smile. And then Aegon moved his head from side to side, his tongue sticking out and flapping around as he did so, making silly noises as he did so. Aegon remembered how this would make Rickon laugh hysterically when he was a baby. And Aegon was delighted at how this had made Ricard burst out laughing. Gods, it's so sweet listening to a little child laugh. Aegon kissed Ricard's forehead. You are the sweetest and most precious little boy in the whole world, and I will always love and protect you, he said as he held him close to him. I promise, he finished before he lay him down on his lap. Ricard moved his head from side to side, as if asking him to do it again. Oh, you want me to do it again, do you, you little firewolf? But of course. Anything for my handsome little nephew, he said. Aegon swung his head from side to side and let his tongue hit all over his face before Ricard was laughing. What is your evil uncle doing to you, my sweet little firewolf? Aegon beamed as he turned around to see Rhaenys and Artos walking towards them. Just making this firewolf laugh, Aegon replied with a smile before he did it again for Ricard. Rhaenys gasped at seeing and listening to Ricard laugh. Oh, that's the sweetest thing in the world. Do it again. Do it again. Rhaenys begged. Chapter 26, The Star of the North. Chapter text. Daenerys v. Harry was speaking with Lord Nestor of House Royce of the Bloody Gate and his eldest son and heir, Sir Albar, one of Harry's closest friends. Whilst Daenerys was seated with her good mother in Lysa's bedchambers overlooking the hills descending down onto the grounds thousands of feet below. Daenerys looked down whilst holding a cup of tea. It takes a lot of getting used to, Lysa said. Daenerys turned to her good mother and sat back down. I'm sure. I'm starting to realize why the Arryns built the Eyrie to rival Casterly Rock. When you stand on the balcony, one would think that the Vale was all kneeling before them, she jested. Lysa smirked as she faced Daenerys. I'll admit, Daenerys, when my husband told me of King Robert's command, for you and Harry to wed. I was scared, she said as her amused smile turned to a neutral smile. As was I. I was scared of leaving the only place I had ever called home and to come to a place so strange, and yet so mysterious and beautiful. Now that I'm here, she said as she looked at the rooftops of the Eyrie itself. I felt the same when I was wed to John, said Lysa. It can't have been easy, said Daenerys. Home. It can't have been easy, to have been wed to a man whom was old enough to be your grandfather, said Daenerys. No. It never was. The wedding night was not quite what I had hoped for when I was dreaming of my perfect wedding day as a girl. But, we were lucky when I gave birth to Harry. John was at my side throughout the whole ordeal, which made it easier for us. It made it easy for us to be a family. Even though there was little love between us, now that we had a son, there was no need for us to try and have more, even though I always wanted a big family, she explained with a sad smile. Daenerys reached for her hand and held on to it. It sounds as though Harry helped you in more ways than one, she said. Yes, he was. He still is. I was always so afraid that I would feel alone here, especially with John gone now. But, Harry has always been such a good son to his mother. And he will be a good husband to you, that I promise, said Lysa. But what of his bastard daughter? Daenerys frowned slightly as she thought about it. Forgive me for asking of this, but I had heard a rumor in Winterfell, that Harry has a daughter from outside marriage, she said. Lysa nodded. It's true, I'm afraid. She's here now, Aelys Stone, said Lysa. She's here? Daenerys asked, surprised. Family, duty, honor. Though they are the words of my house, I taught them to Harry when he was very young. I was disappointed in him when we had heard of her birth, but when I hold little Aelys in my arms, I cannot help but love my little granddaughter, she replied. I felt the same, whenever I held Ricard in my arms, back in Winterfell, Daenerys thought as she remembered playing with him and playing with Rickon and Arya when they were both babies. What of her mother? Asked Daenerys. Her name is Sissy. She was a tavern wench in Iron Oaks and she met Harry at tourney there when Harry won the tourney and was knighted by Lady Anya. He was drunk on his laurels and on wine to the extent that he spent the night with her. He wanted Aelys brought here so that she would have a good life as opposed to growing up vilified by those whom would have been her peers in Iron Oaks. As much as I hate to admit it, he did the right thing. In saving his own daughter, a little baby girl, from a world that is cruel to bastards, which Daenerys knew for certain from the stories she had been told by Jon about growing up a bastard and looked down on by many in Winterfell. Lysa then held on to Daenerys' hand. I swear to you, Dany, by the Mother and the Maiden, that Harry will never be unfaithful to you. He knows that the one thing I hate is those whom are unfaithful to their spouses or break the hearts of those in love, she said. Does she feel this way from experience? Thank you, Lysa, said Daenerys. Lysa smiled before she let go of her hand and sat up. When I was younger than perhaps the Lady Arya, father had welcomed a ward to Riverrun. A young and handsome boy, called Petyr Baelish. His father was a friend of my father's in the War of the Ninepenny Kings. And, being the innocent maiden girl that I was, I fell in love with him, but he loved another. Whom? Asked Daenerys, worried where this might be heading. My elder sister, Catelyn. Every time that I saw them together, I was convinced that she was leading him on and going to break his heart. But, one night, when he was drunk, I had gone to his bedchambers to tell him that I loved him. He sat up and kissed me, and he had kept whispering cat. Cat. What in the seven hells? I tried to tell him that it was I, Lysa, but he just kept repeating Catelyn's name over and over again until he tried to grab me by my shoulders and take me to bed. I slapped him and ran back to my bedchambers. It was from then that I didn't love him. I learned to hate him from that day forth. I certainly felt that he deserved it when he was wounded in fighting Brandon Stark when Petyr challenged him to a duel over Catelyn's hand. Where is he now, this Petyr Baelish? Asked Daenerys. In King's Landing, actually. He is the master of coin. He managed to impress Jon as a customs official in Gulltown when he was recommended to Jon by Lord Grafton. I wanted nothing to do with him, and said as much whenever he met with me in King's Landing. He tried to claim that it was me that he truly loved. But I just knew that he was lying, for I was no longer blinded by the childhood infatuation I had had once upon a time, she explained. Lyanna V. You fight against a great many opponents, brother. Including Thoros of Myr and his flaming sword, Elayna exclaimed as Brandon stood still and his squire, young Ethan of House Forrester, secured his armor for him. I'll be fine, sister. Don't worry. Many of those knights out there are arrogant little men whom think that because their father knighted them that makes them as great a fighter as Aegon the Dragon Knight, Barristan Selmy or Uncle Arthur, Brandon assured her as Ethan passed him his axe and shield. Good luck, brother. Batter all those southern fools to the ground and show them how a Stark fights, Arya said eagerly. I will, Arya, don't you worry. And perhaps one day you can take the fight to these sorts of young knights and make them feel impotent, said Brandon with a cheeky grin. Elayna and Arya left Brandon alone as Ethan secured his helm for him. What is the prize purse for the victor of the melee? Arya asked. 20,000 gold dragons, Elayna replied. Gods, 20,000. I'd buy myself a suit of armor and a sword and shield with that money, said Arya. But you would grow out of that armor within a year, Sister Elayna pointed out. Before Arya could reply, they found their seats with father and mother. How did your brother look? Mother asked. Confident, but not to the extent that he would dare to underestimate his opponents, Elayna replied. Good. There may be many young knights here, but there are experienced fighters here also, said mother. Father looked uninterested in the tourney as he had usually done ever since it began. But he was paying attention to the ultimate round of the melee because Ulrich was fighting in it. The herald loudly announced each of the names of the 64 contenders as they stepped onto the melee grounds. Elayna looked at the king, queen, crown prince, prince and princess seated a stone's throw away from where she was sat. In the past few weeks, she had been invited to drink tea with Queen Cersei in her chambers and was given the chance to walk with Joffrey around the Red Keep gardens. She paid attention to what he seemed to be interested in, hoping that it would be useful. But what she found frightening about him was how he was amused at the tales of how mad Targaryens died, specifically when he showed her around the Great September of Baelor. Begin, the herald shouted as the buglers played a note. Elayna smiled as she watched Brandon cleave his axe onto the helm of a knight of House Free. The Free fell to the ground very quickly before 3 other Free knights were defeated by Brandon and his large axe. Arya clapped for each of Brandon's opponents he had defeated before he faced a knight of House Hightower. Brandon crushed Hightower's shield before Hightower struck at him numerous times, only for Brandon to swing his axe onto his sword and pull it toward him before thrusting the axe's head into Hightower's helm. The blow had severely dented his helm and Hightower dropped his sword before Brandon smashed his axe onto Hightower's breastplate, knocking him down. Brandon turned to a knight of House Tyrell. Looking at his armor, Elayna could tell it wasn't the famed Knight of the Flowers, so she assumed he was a minor cousin. He struck at Brandon skillfully with his sword and managed to defend himself with his shield well enough until Brandon bashed his shield against Tyrell's sword as he tried to thrust at him. The blow didn't disarm him of his sword, but it did unsteady his balance and Brandon used that to smash his axe against Tyrell's exposed shoulder pauldron before he smashed his shield across at Tyrell's helm. Tyrell collapsed onto his back before Brandon turned to fight the last of his opponents, Thoros of Myr himself, with his great flaming sword. He swung it at Brandon's shield a few times, and as it cut onto the shield began to catch fire. Brandon kicked him back and then battered the flames away by pressing it down onto the tourney grounds, just as he came at Brandon again. Brandon bashed the sword away the next time he tried to strike at him. Brandon had disarmed him before he kicked him down once again and pressed his shield down onto the Myrish adventurer's neck before he yielded. Brandon simply bowed his head to the king as the crowd cheered for him. Elayna and Arya loudly clapped for him as he walked before the king. Fine fighting, Brandon. Fine fighting, indeed. I think you will definitely make a fine knight of the Kingsguard one day, the king. Oh, yes. Brandon does deserve to be a Kingsguard knight, alongside Uncle Arthur, Sir Barristan, Sir Oswell and Sir Jaime. My thanks, your grace. It would be a great honor to serve in the Kingsguard, said Brandon as he bowed his head. But more for that later. For now, congratulations, and you are rewarded with the victor's purse of 20,000 gold dragons, he boomed. Elayna and Arya clapped for their brother as he bowed to the king and queen once again and took his leave from them. Let's go and see your brother and congratulate him, said father. Elayna walked with mother, father and Arya to the combatants' resting area. Ethan Forrester was taking Brandon's armor off whilst Brandon was thirstily drinking. "Is that water or wine, Brandon?" asked Mother. "Neither, Mother. As luck would have it, there's a tavern on the street of Silk which sells good beer and mead, though nothing as good you would have in the north," replied Brandon. "That was fantastic fighting, Brandon. Well done, brother," Arya said before excitedly hugging Brandon. "Thank you, little sister," said Brandon with a grateful smile. Elyanna congratulated Brandon before she left with Mother and Father. Arya decided to spend some more time with Brandon first. "We'll leave in 5 minutes, as soon as you are ready," Brandon said. "Father." "Of course, Father," said Brandon. Elyanna looked around the stands, curiously looking around at the nobility of the south. "Begging your pardon, my Lady Stark." Elyanna turned around to see a handsome man, at least 10 years older than she, whom had a curly-haired brown beard, was tall, almost as tall as Artos if not the same height, and was broad and muscular. Holding his hand was a dainty, bright-eyed and sweet-looking young woman. "You have me at a disadvantage, my lord." "You know whom I am, but I do not know whom you are," said Elyanna. "I am Sir Garland Tyrell, Lord of Whitegrove. This is my lady wife, Leonette," he said before Elyanna offered her hand. He kissed her hand and smiled as he faced her, a gesture followed by his wife. "And how might I help you, my Lord Tyrell?" asked Elyanna. "I was simply enquiring as to how you are finding it in King's Landing when it must be so different here than it is in Winterfell," he replied. "Well, at least he isn't falling over himself to try and introduce himself to me," Elyanna considered as she thought about the many boys and men whom introduced themselves to her and even promising to win the tourney for her and tried to ask her for her favor. "It is different. Much more activity and things to see, whereas Winterfell was always so peaceful and quiet," said Elyanna. "And might we offer our congratulations to you on your betrothal to the Crown Prince, my lady?" asked Leonette Fossoe. "That is kind of you, my lady, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed," said Elyanna. This took them both by surprise. "Misinformed, my lady? I was given to understand that you and the Crown Prince were betrothed," asked Garland Tyrell. "Not quite, my lord. My lord father and lady mother agreed for us to court currently, but no betrothal has been set in place," replied Elyanna. "They aren't here to exchange pleasantries. They are here to find out what they can on behalf of Garland's sister, the famous Rose of Highgarden." Elyanna realized as she remembered how father talked of the arrogant Tyrells and just how hungry they were for further power and position, and Mace Tyrell's ambition for a Tyrell queen was infamous. Elyanna saw Brandon, Arya and Ethan leaving the combatants area. "My pardon, my lord and lady. It is time for me to leave with my family." "It was an honor to meet you both," she said. "And you, my lady." "And you," said Garland Tyrell. As she walked away, she could see the look on his face. "Going to send a raven to your greedy father in Highgarden, are you?" Chapter 27, Bitter News from What Was Once Home. Chapter text. Algada's X. It had been 3 weeks since the victory of the Battle of Aquos Dean. The battle had been told as though it were a great legend across Essos. There had even been a tale that in the Seven Hells, those whom died in the battle fought their opponents yet again. "I have fought in many battles, in the Greyjoy Rebellion as Stannis' squire and here in Essos as a sellsword. But the Battle of Aquos Dean shall always be the greatest battle of my life. Aegon the Conqueror will always be remembered as the conqueror of most of Westeros. Robert will always be remembered for crushing the Targaryen dynasty beneath his warhammer at the Trident. And I will be remembered for Aquos Dean, a victory which has created a complete lack in power and authority amongst the Dothraki, allowing Volantis to conquer Dothraki lands. The Dothraki lost a great many people at that single battle, and never again will they be reckoned as the greatest danger to the free cities again." Algada's and Storm Company were bored as they were stationed on the outskirts of Volantis. They had no new contract nor paymaster, though Algada's was glad of the reports he was getting from Shireen on the status of Summerhall. She had even said, "With my share of the coin you send, I've bought many new dresses and jewelry," though Fortis demanded I buy him his own suit of armor. Algada's often passed the time either getting drunk with Bronn and his nephews or sparring with them. But it was on the 20th day that Algada's had woken from a night of drinking. He saw Arodus outside of his tent as he poured himself water. "How are the accounts looking, Arodus?" "For now, my lord, good. However, we must find more work. The coin we have will keep the men satisfied for another 2 more weeks. After that, the men won't be getting paid, he explained. Fuck. But how do we find a new paymaster? Algirdas and Herodas were interrupted when the tent flapped open. Uncle Herodas. Some Dornish noble boy has come, wanting an audience, said Edric. Bring him here, Edric. And find Bronn while you're at it and bring him here, said Algirdas as he poured an additional few cups for Herodas, Bronn and their Dornish guest. Yes, uncle, said Edric. Edric returned shortly after with Bronn and the Dornish noble boy. He looked the same age as Shireen, if not a bit younger. He wore an orange outfit decorated with golden images of the sun all around his tunic and trousers. But when he walked closer to Algirdas, he noticed spears piercing the sons. Martell. But, given his age, that would make this lad Prince Quentyn Martell. Not Tristan, it is said he's the same age as Myrcella, Algirdas thought as he passed a cup to him. Welcome, Prince Quentyn, is it? He asked. Indeed, my lord. Thank you, said the Martell boy as he took the cup offered to him and sat down with Algirdas, Herodas and Bronn. You've come a long way, Prince Quentyn, from Sunspear. All of this way, for what? Asked Herodas. To overthrow your father and become Prince of Sunspear, blurted Bronn. Algirdas raised a brow at Bronn's sarcasm whilst Quentyn Martell looked offended by his uncouth manner. Forgive my second in command, my prince. We've had no contract to fight for in what's been nearly an entire moon, said Algirdas, hoping to not anger their guest when he had come this way. My father, Prince Doran, wishes to hire Storm Company's services for as long as it takes to deal with a persistent thorn in Dorne's side, said the second child of Doran Martell. Does this thorn have a name? Asked Algirdas. Yes, the pirates of the Stepstones. My father wishes for them to be conquered as soon as possible and for the pirates to be wiped out. They've grown large in number, with 60 ships and 8,000 pirates. More join them by the day, from as far as the Iron Islands to as far as Yeti, he said before passing a letter to Algirdas. Algirdas examined the seal and saw it was indeed sealed with the sun and spear of House Martell before he broke the seal. To Algirdas Stormborn, of House Baratheon and Lord of Summerhall. Storm Company's famous deeds in defeating the armies of Braavos and the great Dothraki hordes of Khal Drogo are well known in Sunspear. For Storm Company's service to Sunspear in our conflict with the pirates of the Stepstones, led by Oren Waters, have reached the boiling point, where they have begun to raid our trading ships with impunity and have gone as far as attacking our main trading port of the Planky Town. Dorne's treasury cannot bear the expense of mobilizing all of Dorne's armies and ships in fighting the pirates when I've already invested a great amount of coin in Dorne's economy and development. All loot seized in the Stepstones is yours to take as you see fit. Any further details, speak to my son. Yours sincerely, Doran of House Martell, Prince of Sunspear and Prince of Dorne. The pirates of the Stepstones. Perfect. Just what the men need before they start fighting each other and kill each other. But how will we get there? We have no fleet. Algirdas passed the letter to Herodas and then turned to Prince Quentyn. And how much is your father willing to pay, Prince Quentyn? He asked. An initial payment of 10,000 gold dragons for now, and once the Stepstones is wiped clean of the pirates, then, as well as the loot captured, Storm Company shall be paid an extra 50,000, he replied. Algirdas turned to Herodas and Bronn. Herodas nodded in approval whilst Bronn simply shrugged. Agreed, my prince. But, the difficulty remains, how will we be transported to the Stepstones? We have no ships, said Algirdas. Do not worry about that. I'll send a raven tonight to Sunspear, and the war fleet of Sunspear shall sail for Volantis and collect you, he explained. Algirdas nodded and then turned to Bronn. Go and announce to the men that we've got a new contract, he said. Will do, said Bronn with a grin, and left the tent and started shouting for Algirdas' nephews to gather all of the men. Storm Company will be glad to wipe the Stepstones of the pirates, my prince, said Algirdas, glad of a new contract for the company and more coin for his men before Algirdas and the second child of Doran Martell toasted to Storm Company's siding with Dorne. Robar 4. Maester Hellyweg removed the stitching of Robar's wounds from fighting at the Battle of Iron Oaks. He had been wounded twice in what was his first battle, as he had been describing it in detail to his nephews, Roland and Willam, from Anders' marriage to Mylne Waynwood. The first had been from a rock thrown at his head soon after his helm had been dented from numerous blows. The rock had cut the side of his face open, from just above his right eyebrows right all of the way to the top of his cheek. And the second had been an axe cut deep on his right arm through his chainmail in his duel with Dorulf the Endbringer. "All done, my lord," said Maester Hellyweg. "Thank you, Maester," said Robar before he drank some mead to dull the pain. He stood up from his seat and looked at the scar on his arm before he looked at himself using Maester Hellyweg's mirror. Well, not the sort of scar one gets from training in the yard with your master at arms, Robar thought. Robar thanked Maester Hellyweg once again and left his solar for the armory and to don his armor and fight with his sword once again. It still felt strange at how there was now peace between the Vale and the Mountain clans, now that the latter had sworn fealty to Hauser. In the few moons since peace had been declared and the remnants of Dorulf's army had returned to their homes, builders and artisans had been welcomed to their villages and had begun to build tailors, glass gardens, blacksmiths, tanneries, taverns, walls and roads. And miners had been brought to mine for minerals in the hills and mountains. There will still be a few troublemakers out there. But for now, Lord Arryn has done something no Arryn has done since the Andals first invaded and conquered and what less than 3 centuries of Targaryen domination had accomplished, father admitted. Robar found Ander holding his newly born daughter, Yadira, in his arms with Mylne at his side. "And how is my beautiful niece this day?" asked Robar. "She is exhausted after being fed from her lovely mother," said Ander before he leaned toward her, kissed Mylne's head, at which she beamed at him. "Married for 6 years and still she acts like an excited young maiden around him," Robar thought as he regarded his good sister. "And what of you, brother? How are you?" asked Ander. "Well, Harold's letter got me thinking about what I wanted to do for my future," Robar replied. After Harold had secured the allegiance of the mountain clans, he began to award small castles and lands to various unlanded noblemen, such as John Redfort, Giles Grafton and Harold's cousin, Hubert Hardine. "Are you going to accept a lordship?" Ander wondered. "No, I don't think so. I never spent time learning lessons with you when we were boys on how to rule. I would never be a good lord. I'm better a knight than as a lord," said Robar. "What then for you, Robar?" asked Mylne. "I've been thinking about joining the Kingsguard," said Robar. "The Kingsguard? Does father know?" asked Ander. "Not yet, but it would be a great honor for House Royce if I was accepted," said Robar. "True, but to Robert Baratheon, after how father stood up to him, and to Tywin Lannister on behalf of Lord Stark and the Targaryen children," Ander pointed out. "Lord Stark is Hand of the King now and Lyanna is betrothed to the Crown Prince," Robar pointed out. "All true, but that's Robert Baratheon. Tywin Lannister and his lickspittles across the realm are another matter. A Lannister always pays their debts, and Tywin Lannister is unlikely to have forgotten how father mocked him in front of the nobility of the realm," Ander added. "What are you trying to say, brother?" "All I'm saying is that King's Landing is a dangerous place now. It's not a place for honorable men, and there are nefarious players of the game lurking at every corner, whom prey upon the honorable and the small folk caught in between their ploys for power and influence. Don't let yourself get caught in such things if you do go to King's Landing," said Ander. Artos 6. Artos looked around. The assembled nobility of the north gathered in the feasting hall for the feast. It was the first time in moons Artos had seen Jon, Ulrich, Deanna, Serena and Rickon. Ulrich was sat with Jane, heavy with child, at their seats, and were seated next to Jon and Val, whose son Brandon was in the nursery with Rickard. Artos glanced at Rhaenys, whom beamed at him before nodding at him. Artos took a deep breath before exhaling and stood up and let his voice be heard. "My lords and ladies," he boomed. All chatter and laughter was silenced at the sound of his voice thundering across the hall. "My lords and ladies, Lady Rhaenys and I are proud to welcome you all to Winterfell on this occasion," Artos said. They clanged their mugs on the tables or cheered at this before Artos raised his hand for silence. "My lord father, Eddard, is Hand of the King and is in that fucking cesspit of a capital down south, as we all know. But, it's been nearly 2 years since the end of the War of the Long Night. That war where the North alone stood against the army of the dead and saved the world from certain destruction. For that alone, all men and women across the North should hold their heads up high with pride to call themselves Northerners." All Northerners raised their mugs and cheered at that, especially the Karstarks, Mormonts, Umbers and Foresters. But since those dark days have ended, have we not healed from the wounds dealt unto us from the Night King? Have we not improved the North in ways which not even our ancestors could have dreamed of centuries ago? Artois asked. Aye, bellowed the bannerman. It is with great pride that we should celebrate this here, good lords and ladies of the North. To the North, Artois said, raising his tankard of Carhold bronze. The North, all said as they stood, raising their tankards. Artois drank his mead whilst others such as the Umbers and Carstarks were having drinking contests. How was that? Not too flowery? Artois asked Rhaenys. Not at all, Rhaenys said as she rested her hand on his. I liked the part about holding one's head up high with pride to be a Northerner. If there's one thing I've noticed about Northerners, it's that there has always been a strong feeling of patriotism in the Northerners for the North, she added. How are you feeling? Artois asked as he put his hand on her belly. It's fine, she replied sweetly. Is that my next grandchild you're stroking? Artois turned around to see Aunt Elia joining them with her beautiful smile. Aye, Aunt Elia. It seems eager to make its mark in the world, said Artois, as he could feel kicking as he touched Rhaenys' belly. Certainly feels like a warrior, Rhaenys giggled. Maybe I'll be able to give Ricard and this one lessons when they're old enough. Aegon offered. Who better than their great warrior of an uncle, wondered Artois as he looked up at the lords and ladies enjoying the feast. He could see Deanna was happily chatting with Domeric and sharing the same drink and often stealing from each other's plate. Serena's sweet talking and kissing Brands was making him blush and earning him lots of teasing from his own mother, Barbary Ryswell. Ulrich and Jane were joined by Veon and Siegfried at their table, and Artois noticed how teary Siegfried was when she saw her daughter carrying her grandchild. And then there was Jon and Val, whom was drinking contentedly, whilst Jon was glancing at the Dustin table, presumably at Serena. But Artois was surprised to see both him and Lady Dustin looking at each other. What's all that about? Artois. Shall we go and see Ricard and his cousin Brandon? Rhaenys suggested. Aye. Let's, Artois agreed before standing up and leaving with Rhaenys, Aegon and Aunt Elia. They arrived at the nursery, where Ricard was fast asleep in his crib whilst Brandon Rostock was playing with two toy warriors. Both his parents will be fighting over which of them will get to teach him how to fight, Aegon commented as they looked at Brandon. Aye. But in spite of Jon's skill, I think he would let Val win any fight, Artois replied. That would be very chivalric and knightly of him to do so, Rhaenys added as she picked up Ricard and covered his tiny face with light kisses before holding him tightly to her chest. Aunt Elia beamed at Ricard as he lay fast asleep in Rhaenys' arms. He is so sweet and adorable, Rhaenys whispered. He is, especially when he is asleep, commented Aunt Elia. That's very true. I found that out myself when Arya and Rickon were Ricard's age, Aegon commented with raised brows and a grin. The door opened behind them and Artois turned to see Maester Jellimund. My lord, my lady. A raven has just arrived from King's Landing, from Lord Stark, said Maester Jellimund, extending a letter to Artois. Artois took the letter and broke the seal. Is all well, Artois? Asked Aegon. Aye. Though there is plenty here about the state of the capital, said Artois. What do you mean? Asked Aunt Elia. The crown owes millions to Tywin Lannister, Mace Tyrell, and worst of all, the Iron Bank of Bravos, explained Artois. Gods! The Iron Bank of Bravos. By the Mother Owen, how did Robert become so wasteful? Aunt Elia wondered. But, in other news, Brandon won the melee of a grand tourney celebrating father's ascension to Hand of the King. He won a grand victor's prize of 20,000 good dragons, Artois continued before handing the letter to Aunt Elia. That's good, but that money should be used to pay off the debts to the Lannisters and Tyrells, said Aegon. No. It should be used to give to the poor and those whom need it in King's Landing, argued Rhaenys. That's terrible, said Aunt Elia, still reading the letter. What else is there, mother? Asked Rhaenys. Your good father writes that there is a higher position of poverty in King's Landing than there was in the days of your grandfather, due to the negligence of the crown, the corruption of the gold cloaks, and the fact that Cersei Lannister never gifts any charity to the small folk, said Aunt Elia, whom looked broken-hearted as she read it. Sir Jaime, whom was stood behind Rhaenys, looked just as broken-hearted to hear the news. Chapter 28, The Birth of a Legend. Chapter text. Interlude 9, Bia arents define Bryce, abruca de deus salva rii, e respond perguntas dos faz deus salva riigs how. Miranda Royce, Bia arents. Miranda didn't know what to expect when she first met the new lady of the Uri, and the woman whom had stolen Harry from her. I should hate you, Daenerys Targaryen. But as much as I want to, I can't bring myself to do that, she thought as she looked at the mysteriously beautiful girl, now married to Harry. To celebrate the peace between the Vale and the Mountain clans, all nobility of the Vale had been invited to a grand feast and tourney at the Uri. Miranda's only experiences of the war and the great battle of Iron Oaks was when father and Alba had returned home to the Bloody Gate, exhausted, and Miranda's brother, Alba, had been wounded thrice in the fighting. Miranda looked at Daenerys Targaryen as she stood with Harry, holding his hand, as they greeted guests, and father, Alba and Miranda were the next to be greeted. My Lord Royce, Sir Alba, Lady Miranda, welcome one and all to the Uri on this occasion and thank you for coming all this way, said Harry with a smile. Don't think I didn't notice you looking at my cleavage in this badly fitted dress, Harry, Miranda thought lustfully. My thanks, my Lord Arryn. Lady Arryn, said father before he shook Harry's hand and kissed Daenerys' hand. Being old friends, Harry and Alba shook hands and patted each other on the back. The handshake they, Ander, Robar, Waymar, Jasper, Creighton, John, Michael, Ben, Artis Donijah, Terence Linderley and Mathos Templeton shared, ever since they formed their group, called the Winged Squires, as opposed to the Winged Knights of old. Lady Miranda, said Harry before he kissed Miranda's hand. I think those lips want to do more than just kiss my hand, don't they, Harry? In spite of Miranda's late husband, an old man, dying due to a weak heart, Miranda still felt for the man she had first laid with and enjoyed the company of so much as a girl. Lord Harold, she replied sweetly before turning to Daenerys. My lady. I hope you like it in the Vale. It is a world away from the north and all west of the Vale, said Miranda. It's been a welcome and beautiful change of scenery, my lady, she replied with a beautiful smile. A few hours after the meeting and greeting, Miranda decided to speak with Daenerys and see for herself whom she was and whether she would be happy with Harry. I may not be able to marry him, but I will always care for him. He may be scandalized by the Vale nobility for having little Aelys and raising the beautiful little girl here in the Uri, but he is a good man and deserves a wife whom will always be good to him. Miranda found Daenerys Targaryen at the balcony overlooking the grounds and mountains below, where she and Harry had loved to kiss many times when they were children and growing up. Lady Daenerys. My apologies, I didn't know you would be here, she said. She turned around to face her. Oh, that's all right, Lady Miranda. I just needed some peace and quiet, said the new lady of the Uri. Funny, Harry and I used to say the same thing to our parents when we wanted to sneak out here, Miranda thought with a slight giggly smile. I hope that we can be friends, my lady. And that you may call me Miranda, she said. She looked relieved, and smiled as though eager to have a friendly face to talk to. I would be grateful for that, Miranda. And if you may call me Daenerys, she replied. I would be glad to, Daenerys, said Miranda as she stopped when she was standing right next to her. How are you finding it here? As Lady of the Uri and Harold's wife, she wondered. It's strange. I had never expected to marry someone as high-ranking amongst the nobility of the realm such as Harry, she explained. Harry. Harry tells her to refer him as Harry. Miranda understood that was a sign that they were at least close. But now you are, said Miranda. Now I am. And it's beautiful here. The Vale has so much mysterious beauty to it, said Daenerys. That's how you are described in the stories, Daenerys. As mysteriously beautiful, said Miranda. Daenerys blushed and giggled at that. Silly stories. And what do they describe you as, Miranda? As a beautiful and kind. Beautiful. That I am. However, kind. How boring. No, I aspire to be wicked, admitted Miranda. Wicked? You don't appear to be such a thing, said Daenerys. Appearances are deceiving. I used to think that Harry was just an arrogant little boy that thought himself a man. But he was always kind to me when others blamed me for my late husband's death, explained Miranda. A slight smile appeared on her lips at hearing this about Harry. Have you known him for a long time? Oh, for 12 years. We would often play games as children in the gardens and in the godswood, said Myranda, whilst not admitting that it was there that she had kissed for the first time. Is he good to you? Myranda wondered. He's been nothing but good and kind to me since we have wed. He defended me from the Baratheons and Lannisters when they came to Winterfell. But, I still don't know how I can be good to him and let him know that I am there for him, she admitted. Perhaps I was wrong about you. You are good for him. If I know Harry at all, I am certain that he will already know that you are doing what you can to help him and let him know that he is not alone, Myranda assured her. Daenerys nodded as she took in what she had said. Thank you, Myranda, she said. I'm glad to be of help, Myranda replied with a smile. Algerdus 11. Prince Oberyn, what is there to know about their leader? Asked Algerdus as he and Bronn were sat in a war council with their Dornish benefactors, led by Prince Doran Martell's younger brother, Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper. The bastard of Driftmark. Plenty. He has always dreamt of being a pirate and making riches. But, whilst he is a pirate, he is no leader. Nor has he ever fought a battle, he prefers to fight unarmed merchants, answered the Red Viper. So, he won't expect a surprise attack on the Stepstones? Asked Bronn. No. But even so, he didn't become the pirates' leader by buying their loyalty, said Nymeria Sand, the Red Viper's bastard daughter and one of the Sand Snakes. True. But he is no tactician. He throws everything he has without a second thought or doubt, said Prince Oberyn. Prince Quentyn told us in Volantis that they have 60 ships and 8,000 men. Has that changed? Asked Algerdus. It has not, no, Prince Oberyn confirmed. So, what of the plan, Uncle Oberyn? Lord Algerdus, asked Prince Quentyn. Algerdus looked down at the map, where they were stationed at the Planky town with the Dornish fleet of 30 transport ships and 30 warships. At sunset, we sail from the Planky town and set sail for Grey Gallows. Once we have made landfall, we wait for night. Once night falls, we sail for Bloodstone Isle and then attack. My spies on the isle say that the pirates drink themselves too drunk to stand most nights, said Prince Oberyn. Storm Company has 6,000 men. How many men does Sunspear bring, my prince? Asked Algerdus. 3,000. We may match them in numbers, but not in ships. I would not risk our ships nor thousands of men in a direct confrontation as honorable commanders would want, said Prince Oberyn. Not at the risk of the entirety of Sunspear's fighting men, no. Neither would I place such a risk on Storm Company, Algerdus replied. Good, said Prince Oberyn before he turned to his nephew and daughters, Oberyn, Nymeria, Tyen and Sarala. Get the army and the fleet ready for sundown, he said. They left and both Bronn and Algerdus were standing up when Prince Oberyn raised his hand. No, Lord Algerdus. Share a drink, please. Glad to, Prince Oberyn, said Algerdus as he sat back down. So, Stormborn. What a name that is. How did you earn it? He asked as he passed Algerdus a cup, with wine he poured himself. Algerdus sipped it, he smiled as he recognized the taste of Dornish red. Gods, I love this wine, he replied. You prefer Dornish red? Over something such as Arbor Gold? He asked. Always. But, to answer your first question, I had been born during a powerful storm erupting across the narrow sea when my parents, Lord Steffon and Lady Cassana Baratheon, were returning home to Storm's End after an unsuccessful search for a pureblood Valyrian bride for Rhaegar Targaryen. The storm had lasted 3 days. I was born that first day. But then, on the third day, the ship, the Wind Proud, crashed into the rocks of Shipwrecker Bay. How does a newborn boy survive such a storm? Asked the Red Viper. Algerdus frowned slightly as he thought about how to say it. This was a story he had told many times, to Robert's children, to Robert's bastard children, to Stannis' children and to all friends he had made from his childhood and to his adulthood. But it wasn't telling the story which aggravated him. It was how he grew up without his parents. I wonder what it would have been like if mother and father hadn't died that day. Would they be proud of me becoming famous with my deeds across Essos? Or would they think me a rogue and sellsword, no different than Oren Waters, the so-called pirate king of the Stepstones? Cresson, the Maester of Storm's End, saw the ship crashing into the rocks in the midst of the storm. He shouted to Sir Courtenay Penrose, the Master-at-Arms of Storm's End, and Sir Courtenay took a fishing boat out, and found my mother clinging to life on a cracked part of the hull, but what space there was on board, there was just me. She shouted at him to take me first before he took her. Algirdas, she shouted, take my Algirdas first. But by the time he got me aboard and wrapped me in his cloak, my mother couldn't hold on any longer, and the waves crushed her underneath. Sir Courtenay rowed us back to shore, and I was referred to as Algirdas Stormborn by small folk of Storm's End. When the news was told that I was the only survivor aboard, he replied. Prince Oberyn nodded as he finished his cup of wine. What a story. But, I've been meaning to ask, why is it that you are a sellsword? When you are now Lord of Summerhall, he asked. Well, I don't know if you have ever been to Summerhall, Prince Oberyn, but it's in a state of ruin and disrepair. At least it was when I first went there. What coin I earn for myself in the company, I send to my niece Shireen, whom manages the construction and repairs of Summerhall until I return to it and make it my home, he explained. How long will that be? Asked Prince Oberyn. When there is no contracts for me to take and I know that all repairs and construction at Summerhall is complete, he explained. He nodded before refilling Algirdas' cup. One last question, why is it that you hate all things about the Reach and House Tyrell? How old were you during my brother's rebellion, my prince? Asked Algirdas. The same age as my niece Arianne, he answered. I would have been the same age as your daughter Lorza, if not younger, Algirdas said before drinking, grimacing and frowning as he remembered those days at Storm's End. Mace fucking Tyrell starved Storm's End for an entire year, rather than trying to attack and take the castle. I used to climb atop the walls, shouting and screaming hatred at them and cursing them as loudly as I could for they and for the Seven to hear me. I would demand they all come up and fight me. Come on, you Tyrell bastards. Come on, you cowardly flowers. Come and fight me, I would shout at them as much as I could. But they never attacked, they just starved us whilst I would shake my little fists at them or curse at them whilst wielding my practice sword and axe, he replied. My brother said that to keep the peace and ensure that the Tyrells would never turn on House Baratheon for the Targaryens, he let them get away with all that they did to Storm's End, he replied before facing the Red Viper. Whatever you think of me or my house, Prince Oberyn, know that I would never have condoned the rape and murder of defenseless women and children, especially after all I have seen and been through. He shook his head. I don't believe that a man is guilty for the crimes of his father, or his brother. I hold Tywin Lannister alone responsible for what he tried to do to my sister, my nephew and my niece. I just thank the gods that Ned Stark saved them all and protects them still in the north, even if it is a cold place, he replied. Well, just as you have a debt of blood with the Lannisters, I have a debt of blood with the Tyrells. And I pray to the Seven that one day, they will allow me the chance to take my debt and make the Tyrells curse the day that the Fat Flower of Highgarden laid siege to Storm's End, said Algirdas. At that, they toasted their cups and drank. Chapter 29, The Pirates of the Stepstones. Chapter text. Interlude X, Interview with Luke Pasqualino, Media Center. Quentyn Martell, Luke Pasqualino. Quentyn was excited for the chance to take part in the fighting at the Stepstones. This is it. My chance to prove myself to father, Quentyn thought eagerly as he and Tristan were sat with their cousins, Oberyn, Nymeria, Tyen and Elia aboard cousin Saralla's ship, the Summer Arrow. Quentyn had learned from mother that father was thinking of taking an example from his friend, Eddard Stark, and awarding holdings to his other children and allowing them to form their own houses. Quentyn knew that whilst he was a capable fighter and student from his lessons with Maester Caliot, Arianne was his better in ruling, leadership and in playing the game. Quentyn looked at the night sky whilst sailors rowed quietly on the treacherous waters. How many ships have sunk here on these rocks? How many sailors lost their lives here trying to navigate these waters? Quentyn's heart was racing with fear and adrenaline as he spun his dagger on the balustrade of the ship. Doing that continually won't make the time pass any faster, cousin, he heard from behind him. He turned around to see Tyen holding on to both of her own daggers with an innocent and precious smile on her face. Her face is the only innocent part of her, Quentyn remarked. Well, what will, he asked. Fucking, she said with a lick of her lips. Cousin, I didn't think you were like our cousins in the north and take family to your own bed, Quentyn said with a raised brow. I can make an exception, she replied with a salacious grin. Gods, you're almost as bad as Arry whenever she takes the bastard of God's grace to bed, Quentyn thought. "If your father does name you a lord, whom do you think you will make your beloved bride and lady?" she asked as she walked beside him. "Guinevere Wood," he replied. "Jenith. Gods, she is so pretty and innocent, more so than I. Though, will she be a maiden still when she flowers? Or do you want her all to yourself, cousin?" Tien asked teasingly as she leaned in closer to him. "Gods, you never do stop, do you?" he asked. Before she could open her mouth, Sarala made herself heard. "We're here." "Keep it quiet," she whispered loudly. "This is it. This is it," Quentin thought as he reached for his sword and unsheathed it. "I am ready. I am unbowed, unbent, unbroken. I am a martel of Sunspear." The summer arrow made landfall and gangplanks were placed down onto the rocks. Uncle Oberyn led the soldiers aboard onto the rocks personally, with Quentin, Tristan, Oberyn, Nymeria, Tien and Elia behind him, all whilst the admiral of the Sunspear fleet, Sir William Wells, was sailing Algerdus Baratheon and his force of Storm Company to begin to disembark, just as Sarala maneuvered the summer arrow away to make space. It had felt like an hour before all of Sunspear's army and Storm Company had disembarked and Sir William and cousin Sarala were sailing away. And once the attack is underway, they will surround the pirate ships and prevent their escape, Quentin thought as he remembered the plan. "Move," Uncle Oberyn commanded as he and Algerdus Baratheon led the army through the rocks. It wasn't long before Quentin could hear the enemy. He could hear drunken shouting and singing from a long distance away. A drunken enemy is just as good as a spy, Quentin thought with a grin as he laid eyes on Bloodstone Castle. It was hardly a castle. It was in serious disrepair, and hundreds of tents laid around the castle's grounds. Men used the rocks from the castle for shelter for their tents. And the stench of fucking, wine, mead, piss and shit could be smelled from all directions, Quentin reasoned as he glanced around at all in their army stifling their noses at the stench. "Gods, this stinks 100 times worse than cousin Elia after she spends a moon without a bath from riding her horses." Quentin quietly drew his sword and held his shield up, ready to attack and kill in the name of Dawn and House Martell. "Hold. Wait," whispered Uncle Oberyn as he glanced around. Algerdus Baratheon drew a Mirish spyglass from his knapsack and looked ahead at the waters around their ships. "What do you see?" Oberyn asked impatiently as she tightly gripped her spear. The Stormborn sellsword grinned as he put his Mirish spyglass back in his knapsack. "The ships are all in position," he replied before he drew his sword and axe. Uncle Oberyn turned to cousin Elia and nodded. "Yes, father," she whispered before she drew an arrow from her quiver and lit it aflame. She aimed up high in the sky and let loose. "Forwards!" Uncle Oberyn commanded. Quentin roared as he stood up with the army and charged towards the enemy. The pirates stumbled into each other or tripped themselves up as they realized what was happening. Quentin stabbed a pirate as he tried to draw a dagger. He pulled his sword from his chest and moved to the next, whom was armed with an empty bottle of wine. He threw it at Quentin, very drunkenly. Quentin held his shield up and the bottle smashed into it, falling in pieces to the ground. Quentin sliced his sword across and slit his throat. As he collapsed to his knees, Quentin blocked an attack with an axe from another pirate, but then he parried a second blow with his shield and then eviscerated him. Quentin looked around, impressed as the army of Sunspear was carving through the pirates closest to Bloodstone Castle whilst Storm Company were slaughtering all in their path as they charged towards the docks. The ships were being captured in quick succession by the fleet. "It's over. Oren Water's entire pirate kingdom destroyed in a single night," Quentin thought with a grin. He looked ahead to see Uncle Oberyn running towards Bloodstone Castle. He ran up there to join him, just passing by Tristan as he had beheaded a pirate with 2 blows from his sword. Nymeria dragged a pirate armed with a bow toward her, with her whip, before stabbing him up close. Only a few at the gates of Bloodstone Castle were actually putting up a sober fight. But none of them were a match for Uncle Oberyn as he impaled one with his spear and then eviscerated another with his sword. It was then that Quentin saw a man dressed in expensive and rich clothes, fit for a nobleman of the Crown lands. His hair was long and silver, like a Valyrian, reminding Quentin of cousin Aegon. "Oren Waters. The bastard of Driftmark is trying to run," Quentin shouted as he crossed blades with a pirate. "Oh, no, he fucking won't," Oberyn muttered as she chased after him. Quentin disarmed his opponent with a blow from his shield to his wrist and then stabbed him through the throat. He looked up to see Oberyn disarm the bastard of Driftmark with a powerful swing from her spear before she impaled him through the guts. "My pardons, your grace," she growled with a mocking tone as he fell to his knees, only being held up by Oberyn's spear. She pulled her spear out, letting him collapse onto his face, just as Quentin realized that Storm Company were all cheering. "We've done it." Quentin lifted his sword and shield up high and cheered with them. He found his younger brother and hugged him as they cheered at the top of their lungs. "Unbowed. Unbent. Unbroken." Quentin cheered for all to hear. The words of House Martell were repeated by his brother, their cousins, their uncle and the men of Sunspear. Ashera 8. "Jory, prepare the guard. Brandon, Lyanna and Arya are going to go for a visit to a few streets around King's Landing," said Ashera. "Yes, my lady." "How many will you need?" he asked. 10 should do," she replied. As he left, Ned returned, and looked exhausted as he walked from the door to the dining table. It pained Ashera to see her beloved husband doing the work that Robert was too lazy and idle to do, when he was the king and made it a problem for everyone but him. "Ned," she said before hugging him and kissing him. He happily returned the kiss before he sat down beside her. "Has Robert done anything dangerous?" she asked with worry. "No. But, we managed to finally pay off the debts to Mace Tyrell and Tywin Lannister," he replied. "Then why do you look so exhausted?" she asked. "Because a raven from Mace Tyrell insisted that he was happy to lend to the crown, but did subtly say that he would be willing to forget about the debt entirely if Joffrey was to wed Margaery Tyrell," he replied. "Gods, the ambitious of the world never do give up, not even the likes of Mace Tyrell, whom lies about being a great warrior and commander. It can't all be bad," surely wondered Ashera. No, there was some good news, however. The pirates of the Stepstones have been crushed, and Doran had formally conquered the Stepstones, he explained. "Conquered? But what does he intend to do with islands of little more than sand and rocks with no fertile ground?" she asked. "You forget, Ash, that most of the north has infertile soil, and yet we have glass gardens. Doran has sought formal consent to award the Planky Town to Quentin and the Stepstones to Tristan, for them to form their own houses," he explained. "Doran is following our example in awarding Moat Cailin, Snowhelm and Wolf's Den to Ulrich, Jon and Rickon respectively," she thought. Would Robert object to that, wondered Ashera. He wouldn't care. He might be suspicious of the Martells, true, but the sad reality is that he is past caring, Ned replied as he frowned at just saying that. "I didn't know Robert as well as he did when they were boys, but he was a better man than he is now. Losing Lyanna, being wed to an alluring serpent such as Cersei and not caring for his role as king has corrupted him. And he has abandoned Ned to deal with all responsibilities that come with kingship, so soon after Jon Arryn had been left with those burdens." "Have you sent a reply to Doran?" asked Ashera. I did. And he also wrote that Oberyn, whilst he conquered the Stepstones, and his daughter Oberyn killed their leader, Oren Waters, they had hired a sellsword army that is fast becoming one of the most famous and most desirable sellsword armies in the world right now," said Ned. "Who are they?" asked Ashera, confused. "They are called Storm Company, and are led by Robert's youngest brother, Algerdus," he explained. "Algerdus Baratheon, the man whom killed Viserys." Ashera remembered how Robert taunted Daenerys, Rhaenys and Aegon of his death in Winterfell. "I knew that he had become famous after fighting for Pentos against Braavos, but how has he become so famous?" asked Ashera. "Fighting for Volantis, Storm Company crushed an entire Dothraki horde of less than 100,000 riders. And now, they helped House Martell conquer the Stepstones, due to Doran not wanting to spend so much coin on calling the Banners of Dawn to fight them," he explained. "What do you know of Algerdus Baratheon?" asked Ashera. "I've met him only twice. The first was when Robert demanded me to come for his wedding to Cersei. Algerdus was only a boy of 5 then, and he had made it no secret of how much he hated the Tyrells when he saw Mace and Aeleri Tyrell. And the second was in the Greyjoy Rebellion, when he was Stannis' squire. Even as a boy, he was a legend in the Stormlands. They still call him Stormborn for being born in a storm that claimed his parents," he explained. And now this legendary Baratheon has become a sellsword commander that is slowly becoming one of the best and most feared commanders in the world. If he could crush the Braavosis in 2 battles and wipe out an entire Dothraki horde of Khalasar's below 100,000 riders. If his hatred for House Tyrell hasn't dissipated, then he will come for them, one day. Lyanna 6. Lyanna was happy to explore King's Landing with Mother and with Brandon, especially after the news that Rhaenys had given birth to her niece, called Allmaria, and that Jane had given birth to her nephew, Edwyle. She didn't like how impoverished numerous streets and districts of King's Landing were. There were beggars and homeless children in the hundreds and thousands. She felt sad when Mother had told her and Brandon, in my time with your Aunt Elia as her lady-in-waiting, we had made it our personal quest with Queen Rolla to help all people as much as we could, by having orphanages and shelters built for the homeless. Lyanna was disgusted when she witnessed a group of Goldcloaks drag some beggars off of a street that Mother had made a beeline for. What in the 7 hells are they doing? Mother demanded angrily as she stormed towards them, with Jory following closely after her, alongside 2 other guardsmen. Lyanna had seen Mother get angry numerous times, when Arya wasn't attending lessons or if Artos, Egon, Brandon, Ulrich, Jon and Theon had been out hunting or riding in the Wolfswood for too long. And she had known better than to make Mother angry, for Lyanna never liked to see anyone angry. What is the meaning of this? Mother demanded of one of them. Begging your pardon, milady, but we were removing them from your presence, said one of them, as though they were doing nothing wrong. And whom gave you such orders? I certainly didn't, Mother snapped. But, milady, we wouldn't want your journey around the capital to be made terrible with the sight and smell of the beggars, said another, whom looked surprised at this rebuttal. If there are any problems with the city, I need to know. And my husband, the Hand, cannot fix such problems with the city if they are dragged out of sight, Mother snapped furiously. The Goldcloaks backed away and let go of the beggars. Lyanna turned to the closest beggar. His clothes were sackcloth and torn in dozens of places, with scratches, bruises and cuts all over his arms and legs. He looked nervously up at Lyanna as she stepped in front of him. Are you all right? Did they hurt you? She asked gently. Nothing I ain't used to, milady, he replied with a sad grimace. You shouldn't have to put up with this. No one in this city should have to put up with such maltreatment of the small folk and the homeless. Especially from those whom wear the garments of the city's protectors. How long has it been like this? Asked Lyanna. For years, ever since the Baratheons and Lannisters took over from the Targaryens, milady. I recognize your lady mother. I used to work for her and for good Princess Elia, he replied. You worked for my mother? She asked in surprise. Mother seemed to have overheard, for she turned around and looked at the man Lyanna was speaking to. Milady, I don't know if you remember me. Gods, I do. Yarwick, isn't it? You built signposts for various stores and establishments built with Princess Elia's patronage, said Mother. He looked astonished that Mother remembered him. You're right, milady. And how is Princess Elia, bless her? Is she well? And her little ones, he asked. They are all fine, good Yarwick. All safe in Winterfell. Far from the dangerous place this city has become since I was last here, she replied. You have the right of it, milady. The Lannister soldiers beat or murder any whom speak ill of the Lannister queen or her children. As for the Goldcloaks, they steal from stores and businesses, claiming them in the name of made-up taxes. And Janos Slynt orders for this all to happen, said Yarwick. He does he? How can such a corrupt and horrible man be commander of the City Watch? How is anyone supposed to feel safe in the capital with a man such as he in charge of the city's security? Have his paymasters not considered that if he was offered pots of more gold than they could pay, then he would turn on them with a smile? Lyanna gave Yarwick a gold dragon. You and all of King's Landing deserve better than this, Goodman Yarwick, said Lyanna with a kind smile. 7 bless you, milady, he said with a sad smile as he closed his fist around the coin. Lyanna beamed at Mother at how she was using the gold Brandon had earned from the tourney to order for a few orphanages to be built in Flea Bottom, and how she had made a large order for clothes and food to be distributed around the poorest parts of King's Landing. And she could see how Mother was looking up at the sky, as if imagining something in the sky. What are you thinking of, Mother? Asked Brandon. Of having an aqueduct built here. It would provide water to tens of thousands of small folk here and help them stay clean. If they do not, then the chances of disease striking in the city are far greater, she explained. And if such a disease were to strike tomorrow, Mother? Asked Brandon. With poverty as extreme here as it is, it would be a mere matter of days, perhaps a week, before it would strike at the Red Keep. And of course, it would be a lot better if sewers were built, so that we might be able to breathe this foul air. But no. Apparently great feasts, tourneys, the finest fashions from Casterly Rock or Highgarden are of greater importance than such things, said Mother. Chapter 30, Finding Love. Chapter text. Daenerys 6. After the ending of the tourney celebrating the peace, which saw Robert Royce as the victor, whom was one of Harry's best friends, the nobility of the Vale began to leave for their respective homes. Daenerys enjoyed the feast and celebrations, which gave her the chance to properly meet the nobility of the Vale, and she began to enjoy the company of various Vale noble ladies, such as Myranda Royce, Zilla Royce and Jocelyn Waynwood. She had even befriended the mountain guide for travelers and for the nobility journeying to and from the Eyrie, Mirestone. But with them all gone, she was grateful for the peace and quiet that returned to the Eyrie. And, as Lady of the Eyrie, she found herself attending services at the September, as well as praying at the Godswood. On her second prayer at the September, Harry had asked her, "Why do you pray to the Seven? I thought you grew up worshipping the old gods." "I did, but, if I am to be Lady of the Eyrie, I should be familiar with the Seven," she explained. But it was after a third morning of prayer at the September, that Daenerys felt happy with Harry. She smiled when he entered the room, she felt her heart flutter whenever he spoke to her or even looked at her, and whenever he wasn't in the same room as her, she wanted nothing more than to be in his presence. Thinking about it, she remembered how Rhaenys had described how she felt for Artos. "Even just talking about it makes me happy. Whenever we talk, even now, or when he just puts his arms around me, I always just feel so happy and so safe. If I had ever had a bad day, he would always be there to make me feel like the world is not such a terrible place and to remind me that he would always love me. Aunt Dany, what I'm saying is that love isn't what the storybooks or tales talk of. It's being with someone who doesn't love you only for your beauty or what you're like in bed. It's being with someone who cares for you, listens to what you have to say, values your opinion and understands you. It's about being with someone who loves you for who you are and not whom the other wants you to be." Daenerys felt that in the past few moons since their arrival in the Eyrie, Harry respected her, he respected her opinion, he listened to her counsel in important matters ranging from hearing small folk petitions to preparing for war with the mountain clans and hill tribes. And from looking at how he smiled at her, reminded Daenerys of how Uncle Ned would smile at Uncle Ashura and how Artos would smile at Rhaenys. And so, that night, Daenerys felt that the time was right. "I'm ready," she thought as she walked to his chambers. She was dressed in her nightgown, and as she entered, she saw Harry looking at his scars in the mirror. He ran his forefinger from the top to the bottom of his facial scar. As he looked at it, she noticed how he did so, as though reliving a memory just from looking at the scar. She recognized the look from after the War of the Long Night, when Artos, Aegon, Brandon, Ulrich, Theon and Deanna returned, exhausted, scarred and finding it difficult to return to the peaceful life of Winterfell. "Harry," she whispered. "Dany," he turned around and saw her. "What's wrong? Are you all right?" he asked with concern. That was one of the main reasons why Daenerys was beginning to feel for him, for he was always so kind and caring to her, to his mother and to little Aelys. Everything is well. Everything is perfect, you might say," she replied. "Perfect?" he asked. Daenerys walked toward him until she was within touching distance of him. She lifted her hand to his face and stroked his cheek tenderly. "I'm ready, my love," she whispered as she leant in. She kissed him gently on the lips as she leant in. She beamed at how he kissed back and held her close to him with his hands and then ran his own hand through her braided hair and let the braids loosen. Daenerys didn't care for how her hair fell to her waist. All she cared about was kissing Harry and holding him close to her. He broke from the kiss, hungrily breathing for air as he did so. "Are you sure, Dany? I don't want you to do this unless you are ready for it," he asked with concern. "I am. I promise you, Harry. My love," she said again with a beaming smile before leaning in and kissing him. As he held her to him, she reached for the shoulder straps of her nightgown and she unfastened them. She felt her dress fall to the floor and felt the cool easterly wind of the hills blow through the window and onto her breasts and sweating lower body. Harry looked surprised when he broke from the kiss and realized what she had done. He slowly proceeded to take off his own clothes. Daenerys marveled at his toned and muscular body, from his hardened abdominal muscles to his strong and thick thighs, before she laid eyes on his strong and hardened member, almost as thick and hard as her wrist. Daenerys thought. Gods, that is so big, Daenerys thought as she held him to her again, kissing him hard before her left hand was resting on his shoulder and her right hand found his fully grown and throbbing member. I love you, Harry, she whispered. And I love you, Dany, he whispered back as he gently pushed her to his bed. Daenerys lay down on the bed, with her lower body in full view of Harry. He knelt down and held onto her thighs before he leant in closer. What are you doing, Harry? She asked. Rather than answer her question, she could feel his tongue on her cunt. Oh, gods! Gods! Harry, she exclaimed. This feeling was unlike any other she had felt. At first there was a slight pain at where his tongue had entered her, but she couldn't help but grab onto the sides of the bed. She let go of the bed and then reached for Harry's wolf and messy dirty blonde hair. She fondled with his hair whilst his tongue fondled with her cunt. Don't stop, Harry. Don't ever stop, she begged, as she laid her back fully on the bed and closed her eyes, euphoric in what he was making her feel. I've barely started, my love, he replied as he stood up to face her, with a cheeky and boyish grin on his face. He reached for the top of the bed before he gently pressed his member against her cunt. Just be gentle, please, Harry, Daenerys said. I will, he replied with a gentle smile. He leant in slowly, pushing inside her. Fuck. Daenerys felt breathless for a moment as she could feel him deep inside her. It felt as though he was traveling all of the way inside from the entrance right to the womb. Harry kissed her hard, during which, she bit his lip. She moaned loudly as he gently thrusted in a few times. She held him by his back tightly, pulling him in as he thrusted more. As the speed of his thrusts increased, the noise of her moans also increased. Daenerys screamed and shuddered as she felt herself orgasm. She panted as Harry briefly stopped. Before she could say anything, Harry reached for her breasts with both hands. She moaned as his fingers fiddled with her nipples. Daenerys took deep breaths as he leant in, licking and kissing her breasts whilst thrusting deep inside her. Gods, this is so good. It's so wonderful and blissful. I just want to do this with Harry, forever, she thought as Harry moved from her breasts to her neck, kissing it all over before kissing her lips. Daenerys held onto his head, gripping it with both hands whilst holding onto his lips with her own, refusing to stop kissing him. She moaned at the kiss and at his continued thrusts inside her. They broke from the kiss as Harry's labored breaths increased with the pace. Dany. I'm close. I'm close, he said. Before she could reply, she could feel it. How a torrent of his seed swam inside her from her cunt to her womb. She panted for breath as Harry pulled himself out. He lay down on the bed next to her as he panted. Daenerys turned to him, beaming as she did so. She reached for his face and pulled him closer, kissing him hard. Harry, she said. Dany. I never ever want us to leave this bed. Not ever, she said as she wrapped her arms around him and holding him close to her. I couldn't ask for better things in my life than being in her with you, my love, he said before kissing her. I love you, she said with a smile. And I love you, he replied before kissing her again and wrapping his arms around her. Bellenora 3. Bellenora sat on her favorite place at Lotus Point. A lone beach called Parrot's Flight which curved for 2 miles on the left side of the coastal lines of Lotus Point. Bellenora used to feel so happy whenever she came here for festivals celebrating the new year. But now in the new year, she was in no mood for celebration, not when Rugaria was showing no sign of easing his rule over the Summer Isles or ceasing his intolerance for the faith of the Summer Islanders or their culture. Bellenora stared out at the waves. Jantaras, great lord of the sea, send us a fleet of ships and an army of warriors to free your faithful brethren from this oppressor, she inwardly prayed, not saying the words out loud out of habit for never daring to breathe a word of prayer to her gods, the true gods whom had cared for the Summer Isles for centuries and millennia. She could hear the sound of footsteps on sand behind her. She did not break her gaze on the summer sea to see whom it was until they sat beside her. Sister, you shouldn't be out here. We need to be back home, said Xharo. How can I when it has been over a year since our home had been conquered by this tyrant and whole families have been murdered? But it won't do good if we are arrested for daring to speak a word against him, he replied before he out his arm around her shoulders and lifted her up. It won't be like this forever, sister. I promise, he said. What makes you say that? Has there been news? Asked Bellanora. Well, good news and bad news, he replied. What is the bad news? Asked Bellanora, fearful that Salinos or Gilaro had been murdered by Ruguria's men. Father's spies in Dragonspire say that Ruguria has made a trading agreement with the West AOC, trading their steel for our gems, spices and wood, he replied. With such a trading agreement between Ruguria and Robert Baratheon, the West AOC would never care for the little summer isles or how we suffer under this tyrant, she thought sadly. And what good news is there, she wondered. Jalabaxho has returned from his very long exile in Westeros and has told father that he will travel abroad in search of a sellsword army to hire them to take the fight to Ruguria, he explained. The West AOC are probably glad to be rid of that exiled fool. It will take a great sellsword army to defeat Ruguria. Perhaps the Golden Company, Xharo suggested. Them, or the great West AOC sellsword army that is making legends across Essos and the Stepstones. Storm Company, Bellanora added. Algerdus 12. In the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the young and innocent. In the name of the maid, I charge you to protect all women. Arise, Sir Tolas Waters, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, said Algerdus. Those in attendance, including Tolas' brothers, Bronn and the Martells, clapped for Tolas as he stood up and shook Algerdus' hand. A knight of his skill and his deeds behind him, he would be a welcome addition to the Kingsguard, if they would see past the fact that he is a bastard. Cersei would definitely never want him in the Kingsguard, in case he was a threat to her perfect Joffrey's claim. Tolas was hugged and congratulated by his brothers, all of whom had been knighted. Algerdus was proud of his nephews for being knighted by Robert's command, which Algerdus did by proxy. Even Bronn was knighted, which the gruff sellsword was actually pleased about. The conquest of the Stepstones was celebrated across Dorne, Oberyn was telling Algerdus. And with them no longer a threat to the trade of Dorne or trading ships sailing around the Sea of Dorne, said ships could sail around Dorne's coastlines without fear for sailing into pirates. And Oberyn had also told them that his brother, Prince Doran, had sent an important letter to him to tell his sons, Quentyn and Tristan. With the knighting over, Oberyn turned to his nephews, whilst Algerdus stepped to be beside his own nephews. Quentyn. Tristan. Your father has sent important message for me to pass on to you both. You are both now lords of your own holdings, he said before showing them the letter. As they read it, Oberyn fixed his gaze on Quentyn. Quentyn, you are to be lord of the Planky Town and form your own noble house of House Quintel. And Tristan, you are to be lord of the Stepstones and your noble house is that of House Tristil, he announced. Algerdus clapped for the two sons of Doran Martell now becoming lords of their own right, as opposed to being just spare heirs for their sister Arianne. Lordships will keep them satisfied, said Algerdus. Unless they plot to try and steal Sunspear from their sister, Edric pointed out. No, Ed. Because by doing this, they would swear aside all claims that they may have to Sunspear, said Algerdus. Moving aside from all this pomp and shit, what is next for the company? Asked Bronn as he walked toward them. We are to stay here, on Bloodstone, Bronn, Algerdus replied. We stay here? On this godforsaken place? With barely any food or water? Asked Robin. We've made plenty of gold from this conflict, Robin. Or have you forgotten already? Tymond asked. Indeed, whilst the Dornish took the captured pirate ships for themselves, Storm Company took the loot all for themselves. The loot amounted to 100,000 gold dragons, 300,000 silver stags, 10 barrels filled with gemstones and 50 barrels filled with jewelry. None of that means anything when there's nothing to fucking do here on these fucking horrible islands, muttered Torwin. You mean, other than sharing a bed with the sand snakes? Tolas asked with his arms crossed. It's all I can do to pass the time without fucking rowing for dawn for a fuck and to drink myself to sleep, replied Torwin. We'll set sail for the disputed lands a few days from now. Before he left with the loot, Herodotus told me of a ruined stronghold on the coast of the disputed lands that's a day's ride away from Myr. We'll use it to base ourselves for now and bring plenty of food and drink with us until our next contract, said Algirdas. With such a base, we might be able to call it home, reasoned Tolas. Only when we are not on contract. I'll speak with the magisters of Myr about keeping it as our home, and they would not dare to take it from us, when one considers our reputation, said Algirdas. Are you sure, uncle? Myr is a powerful free city, Mark pointed out. True, but they are reliant on hiring sellswords to do their fighting for them, as opposed to having Myrish men fight for their country in their wars with Tiosh and Lys over the disputed lands. And they have been known to pay lavishly to Dothraki culls. Considering that, they should be fucking grateful to us for not having to spend so much to prevent the Dothraki from attacking them, Algirdas explained. Whom would dare to make an enemy of Storm Company? When we have never suffered defeat and have crushed the Bravosis, an enormous horde of Dothraki and the Stepstones pirates, wondered Edric. You would think that, lad, but the milords back home and here in Essos would think lowly of us sellswords and think that such sellswords are no match for great and honorable knights, Bronn reasoned. Chapter 31, A Knight of White Harbor. Chapter text. Egon 8. Egon liked being in White Harbor. He enjoyed the smell of fresh and salty sea air as he rode to the tourney grounds. He had come alongside Artos to meet with Lord Marndaly, to inspect the restoration of Wolf's Den and to reunite with Rickon and see how he was doing. Elsewhere in the north, Egon had been to Moat Cailin, Snowhelm, Carhold, Ironrath and Last Hearth. Whilst Winterfell was home and where he felt most comfortable and the happiest, he enjoyed travelling around the north, the largest of all kingdoms of Westeros, especially after Uncle Ned's annexation of the lands beyond the wall. But whilst they were in White Harbor, Egon had decided to compete in the annual White Harbor tourney, a small tourney taking place in the city itself, just in front of the September of the Snows. It was established in the time of Lord Desmond Marndaly to celebrate the warrior. As well as a source of entertainment for the people of White Harbor, it was also a chance for the men of White Harbor to earn a knighthood. The prize was 500 gold dragons and a knighthood for those whom weren't already knights. Egon walked up to a tourney clerk, whom was writing the name of a middle-aged man, whom looked like a southerner. He was dressed in more furs than a northerner would wear. Having grown up in the north, Egon found it funny when he saw how southerners tried to shield themselves from the cold by wrapping themselves in as much furs as they possibly could. Your name? Asked the clerk. Sir Roger of House Free, he replied before pressing a silver stag into the entry chest. What the fuck? Even if it is the name of my father, what gives your father the right to give the name of a dragon to a fucking free weasel? The clerk looked up at him. You've come a long way to take part in this tourney, my lord, he said. Nay, I come to win this tourney, and perhaps the hand of Lord Marndalis' granddaughter, he said arrogantly. Gods, what has gotten in this fucking idiot's head? The clerk raised his brows whilst Roger Free signed his name on his logbook. Egon walked to the clerk whilst the free fool walked away. Another for the tourney, he asked, whilst looking down at his book. Aye, he replied before putting a silver stag on the table. He took the silver stag and nodded before putting in the chest. Your name? Egon, of House Targaryen, he replied. The clerk looked up at him, just hearing the name of his house. His eyes opened wide when he saw the silver of his hair and the violet of his eyes. Do just sign here, my prince, he replied. Egon signed the book with a nod. He walked into the tourney list and was equipped by servants with armor befitting of the famed Knights of White Harbor, the best heavy cavalry force in the north, and had earned fame in the Dance of the Dragons, the Black Fear Rebellions, Robert's Rebellion and the Greyjoy Rebellion. Egon looked at the armor he wore, a chainmail cuirass with a tabard bearing the merman and turquoise colors of House Marndaly. Well, at least I have the chance of being a Knight of White Harbor if I ever decide to leave Winterfell, Egon thought as he ran his fingers over the tabard. Egon could hear the cheers of the small folk as a nearby servant announced to all combatants. It begins. Take your places on the tourney grounds. Egon placed a helm covering his face on his head and took up a great sword from the armory. As he did so, he found Roger Free. He was perhaps one of the ugliest men he had ever seen. Well, not even father would have looked that ugly after getting smashed in by Robert the Usurper's hammer. His smile was mocking as he looked around the other combatants as though he was superior to all of them. If he was in any way unequal to a knight of White Harbor, I would have known. I have heard of all the living warriors and knights whom can say they are the best of Westeros. I've met many of them. Tormund Giantsbane, St. Othan, Jorah Mormont, Great Jon Smalljon, Asher, Harryon, Sir Alisa, Sir Jemmy, Artos, John, Brandon, Uncle Ned, Bronze Yohn Royce, Robar Royce, Jaime Lannister, Arthur Dayne, Gerald Hightower, Oswell Went, Barristan Selmy, Sandor Clegane, Adam Marbrand, Lyle Hall, Loras Tyrell, Garland Tyrell, Uncle Oberyn, and Lynn Corbray. But you, Free, I've never once heard of you. Aegon stepped onto the tourney grounds, and looked around, and he counted 63 other combatants on the tourney grounds. Aegon looked up at the main stands, where he could see Lord Wyman Marndale, his sons Sir Willis and Sir Wendell, Sir Willis' wife Leona Woolfield and their daughters Winifred and Wyler, Artos and Rickon. Lord Wyman stood up from his chair. Though he was the fattest man he had ever met, he was also one of the kindest and most friendly men he had ever met, and there could never be any doubt as to his loyalty to House Stark. My friends and family, honored guests and good people of White Harbor, I welcome you all to the White Harbor tourney, indeed the 150th of its name. And for such occasion, I promise you a worthy show. Those in the stands and in the audience clapped and cheered. My personal thanks to our honored guest today, Lord Artos of House Stark, for his visit to us today. And now, Septon Medrick will bless the tourney in the name of the warrior. The very same Septon whom officiated Aunt Daenerys' wedding to Uncle Harold walked onto the middle of the grounds. In the name of the warrior, good warriors and knights, take your places and fight to your opponent's end in honorable combat, he said before making the sign of the seven. And at that, the trumpeters blared a loud note for all to hear. Aegon drew his great sword and decided to face Rhaegar Free first. He was easy to find, for whilst he wore the armor of House Marndale, he was also wearing a badge of House Free. Aegon swung his great sword down onto his shield. His blow knocked his shield from his grasp. He yelped with a high pitch as his shield fell to the ground. "Mercy, sir," he begged. "Pathetic. Not even father screamed as you do," before the usurper's hammer struck into him, Aegon thought as he swung his great sword onto his face. "Still think you're going to wed Lady Winifred, you fucking worm?" Aegon asked with a grin. "Winifred is a fair and beautiful girl, sweet and kind to all. She deserves better than fucking disgusting maggots old enough to be her father such as you." Another attacked him, with a large axe. Aegon blocked the blow, ensuring that the axe hooked onto the center of the blade of the great sword. Aegon pushed it aside and then wrenched his sword free before striking him down with a heavy blow on his helm. Aegon turned around to face a knight, whom he could see looked like an experienced knight of White Harbor. Aegon swung his sword to meet with his. He skillfully blocked the blow before trying to push him forwards with his shield. Aegon sidestepped away from the push before swinging his sword onto him. He just managed to block the blow with his shield, but he fell to his knee from the power of the blow and losing his balance. Aegon took the chance and smashed his sword onto his shield, knocking it down and then disarming him and smashing his sword onto his helm. Aegon turned to another opponent, a large and bearded man whom looked more like a man of Last Hearth than a man of White Harbor. He swung a large mace at Aegon. Aegon blocked the blow and sidestepped away before his mace could connect with his helm. The mace man swung again. Aegon held his sword up with one hand holding the grip whilst the other held onto the point. He blocked the blow of his mace and pushed the mace away before grabbing the grip with both hands and slicing it down onto the mace. The mace man managed to block the slice, but it had disarmed him. Aegon swung his sword at his cuirass, knocking him to the ground. Aegon wielded his sword around once before looking for his next opponent. He found one just defeating two other combatants. He wielded his sword and shield skillfully, and he looked like he was more experienced than his previous opponents. Looking around, Aegon could see that he was one of the four last fighters in the tourney. Aegon reached for his helm and took it off as he walked toward the fighter as he held his shield up and held his sword ready to thrust. Definitely not a man whom picked up a sword yesterday and now thinks he is Aemon the Dragon Knight. Egon swung his sword down onto him, aiming for his sword rather than his shield. He just managed to knock his sword down before he could bash his shield against his sword. Though disarmed, he swung his shield at Egon as a preemptive strike before he grabbed another sword from one of the fallen fighters. Egon attacked just as he readied himself. He blocked the blow with his shield, but he saw how the blow shook him. Egon swiveled as he swung his sword again, this time at the side of his shield. The blow affected his balance before Egon attacked again. He tried to thrust his sword at Egon. Egon grabbed the tip of his sword with one hand and held the grip with his other before he glanced the thrust away. Egon then struck down onto his shoulder. He fell to his knees, injured and groaning before dropping his shield and sword. He turned around to his last opponent. Another knight of White Harbor. Egon panted through his nose, smelling the salty sea air of White Harbor as he took careful steps toward him. The knight struck a few blows at him, which Egon blocked before swinging his sword at the knight's shield. The knight deflected the blow with his shield skillfully enough, but the blow had made him take a step back. Egon dodged a thrust before deflecting another thrust with his sword as it pierced into the ground. The deflecting disarmed the knight of his sword. Egon sliced his sword down onto his cuirass, defeating him for good before Egon looked up at the stands. The trumpeters blared a victorious and triumphant note whilst the small folk clapped and cheered for him. Egon blushed in shyness at the praise he was receiving. "Dear guests, the victor is Egon of House Targaryen," announced Lord Mondaly. Again they clapped and cheered, though Egon looked around to see many looked surprised at the mere mention of his name. "I've lived in the north for nearly 20 years, and still many are surprised of my name in the north." Egon walked to the Mondaly stand before bowing his head and throwing his sword aside. "My Lord Mondaly," he said, bowing his head. "Egon, that was some of the best fighting I've ever seen in my life," he said. "You are very kind to say, my lord," said Egon nervously as he looked up at his good brother, Artos, whom just smiled proudly at him. "And of course, you are to be rewarded with the victor's prize of 500 gold dragons." The audience again clapped and cheered for the prize. "My thanks, my lord, but I have just one request, if I may be so bold." "Oh, but of course, name it." "If it is in my power, it is yours," he said with a benevolent smile. "I would consider it to be an honor to be knighted," he replied. Later, at the September of the Snows, Wyman Mondaly took House Mondaly's sword, Sea Splitter, and walked to Egon, as he knelt before the statues of the seven. "In the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the young and innocent. In the name of the maid, I charge you to protect all women. Arise, Sir Egon of House Targaryen, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms." Elyanna 7. Dearest Elyanna, I hope that this letter finds you well. I'm sorry that I never got the chance to tell you this in person. It seems so strange to put this to parchment rather than say it to you. But the truth is that I love you. I've loved you since the day I first saw you dance in circles with Rhaenys, Aunt Daenerys, Jane and Beth. I know that I shouldn't be writing to you of this when you are being courted in King's Landing and have the eyes of the Seven Kingdoms on you, but I would never have been able to live with myself if I hadn't told you what has been on my mind since I was old enough to realize it. It seems so strange that I have fought in battles against the free folk, Thans, mammoths, giants, whites and white walkers. And yet, whenever I am in your presence, I lose all courage I have and I cannot think about anything or anyone else other than you. Just being in the same room as you makes me feel a happiness that I cannot get enough of. And your kind words to me whenever I was taunted and belittled by Southerners whom hate me for my father and grandfather, were of far greater comfort than you could ever have imagined. Again, I am sorry for writing to you of this, but I couldn't bring myself to lie to you anymore. I love you, Elyanna Stark, now and forever, whatever may happen. Egon. Elyanna put the letter down, having reread it a third time since its arrival the day before. And as she put it on her table, she thought back to all the times she had been alone with Egon in a room. And whenever he had been jesting or laughing with her brothers, he would stop when he saw her and turn away, as though he was fearful of her disapproval. And then there was their return from the War of the Long Night, when she had gone to see him and see if he was all right. But whilst he looked strong and hard as Maester Jellimond was about to examine his stitched wounds, when he laid eyes on Elyanna, He blushed before looking away, as though he didn't want her to see him like that. But why did he keep what he feels a secret from me? Did he think that mother and father wouldn't allow us to be wed? Eleanor's thoughts were interrupted when she heard a knock on the door. "Enter, please," said Eleanor as she stood up and turned to face the door. It was a knight of the Kingsguard. Sir Jaime Lannister. "My lady. My sister, the Queen, summons you to her chambers for some tea," he said. "Thank you, Sir Jaime." "Will the Crown Prince be there?" she asked. "I'm afraid not, no. My nephew is trying out a new weapon that just arrived specially for him." "A Mirish crossbow," he replied. "Yes, I know of his love for crossbows, as opposed to the sword, as any other prince would be, like Aegon." Not for the first time, Eleanor had compared Joffrey to Aegon and thought about how Aegon was more princely and better raised than Joffrey. Joffrey was never uncourteous or unkind to her, she knew that. But she got a sense that he seemed to be starved of the affections of women, because of his mother. But she didn't like how Myrcella and Tommen looked at Joffrey whenever they saw him. They looked afraid of him, just like when Eleanor had felt fear when she saw the captured White brought to Winterfell from Castle Black. "And how are Princess Myrcella and Prince Tommen, Sir Jaime?" Eleanor asked as she closed her chamber door and followed after him. He smiled at her question. "They are well. Princess Myrcella is currently sewing with her cousin Rosamund. And Tommen is at his studies with his cousin Tyok under Grand Maester Pycelle," he explained. "He talks about his nephew Joffrey without any affection. Whereas when he speaks of Myrcella and Tommen, he speaks very fondly of them as though he was a proud father of them," Eleanor noticed as she walked with the dashing and handsome Kingsguard knight, otherwise known as the Kingslayer, the very man whom slew the man he was sworn to protect. When they reached the door to the Queen's chambers, Eleanor wondered what it was they would talk about. The last time she had been invited to her chambers, she had talked about the things that Joffrey enjoyed the most, such as using a crossbow, horse riding and dancing. Whilst Eleanor enjoyed the latter too, she did not like crossbows, especially not the Yetish ones that father had equipped the northern armies with. Sir Jaime opened the door and Eleanor looked to see Queen Cersei sipping tea. It surprised Eleanor that the Queen had no ladies-in-waiting by her side, just as Aunt Elia had mother at her side when she was Princess of Dragonstone, and how Queen Rolla had Cassandra Estermont, Nymeria Martell and even Queen Cersei's own mother, Joanna. "Eleanor, sweeterling. Do come in." "Thank you, Sir Jaime," she said with a smile. "My queen," he replied before leaving and closing the door behind him. Looking at her now, Eleanor observed how she smiled. Her smile was very unlike Aunt Elia's smile or mother's smile, and how their smiles made her want to smile and made her feel at ease. Whereas the Queen's smile made her feel nervous, as though she was being watched by a lion, as though she was prey. At her bidding, she sat down opposite her and drank some tea already prepared for her. "Are you enjoying your courting with my son?" she asked. "I am, my queen. Though Sir Jaime tells me that he is enjoying his newest crossbow," she replied. "He is? Yes, I am sorry that he isn't here. But he has been waiting a long time for such a crossbow," she replied sweetly. "That's quite all right. But, Your Grace, I hope you don't mind me asking a personal question," she asked. "No, of course not, little dove." "What is it?" she asked. "Do you not have ladies in waiting? I just thought it strange that you don't have ladies from Riverrun to the Arbor competing to serve at your side." Eleanor wondered. She noticed how she grimaced slightly. "You are quite right, dove. The first year I was queen, many did vie to serve as a lady-in-waiting for me. But, I learned from my father that I could not trust any of them," she replied. "Trust them? She speaks as though they all play the Game of Thrones." "Not all of them do. You look surprised. I am aware that your parents do not play the game, but it is simply what must be done if you are to be queen. And to make sure that all do not dare oppose you," she explained. "She speaks as though she thinks I am as little and naive a girl as Myrcella. Perhaps that's what she wants, someone to control, just as she wants to control Joffrey." So, Eleanor decided to play her own game with her, to play the fool and learn what Cersei's game was. "How does one do that?" Eleanor asked with false interest. She took the bait as she had hoped. "Well, not by doing what your mother would have you do. I heard of you and your brother accompanying her around King's Landing to bring charity to the small folk. Your enemies will see it as a sign of weakness that they will exploit. The small folk of King's Landing are in dire of need of our help. If I am to one day be your son's queen, they, the crown's subjects, should be looking to the crown for leadership and a helping hand. Charity is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of strong and capable leadership, of standing for those in need of such help and helping them to stand beside you, rather than kneeling before you in fear. Is it such a terrible thing, your grace? To earn the people's love for when Joffrey and I are to be king and queen, she asked. It is not, no. But they must know who they serve and never mistake the crown for a moneylender. One can only truly be safe if all one's subjects fear them. If there is one thing I would want of all men and women across the world, it is that they must remember their place in the world. Chapter 32, The House of Cards Crumbles. Chapter text. Willers 3. Garland and Leonette returned from King's Landing, said father eagerly, excited for whatever news he was bringing from the capital. Father, we must be ready for any news that he brings. Whether it is good or bad, Willers cautioned. Of course. Of course, Willers, dear boy. But we must be hopeful and optimistic for the future, a future in which House Tyrell is no longer looked down on by the other great houses, and a future where your sister is queen and there is Tyrell blood on the Iron Throne, father reiterated. He just doesn't understand. None of what we do matters unless we have a steady stream of information fed to us on what is going on in the capital and whether or not we actually have a successful chance of ensuring that Margaery will be queen. Willers leant on his crutch as he walked down to the courtyard of the palatial keep. He beamed at his brother and his good sister as they rode into the courtyard, underneath their own banner, that of House Tyrell of Whitegrove, which was of 2 golden roses. As Garland helped Leonette down from her horse, Willers frowned at how she looked at him. Of course he was happy for his brother to be wed to such a kind and graceful woman such as Leonette Fossoe, and he was happy that they loved each other. But ever since Willers' crippling injury to Oberyn's lance, no fair lady of the Reach, Dorne, the Crown Lands, the Westerlands or the Stormlands spared him a glance. Father is so driven in his quest for Loras to be the greatest knight of our time and for Margaery to be queen, that he has forgotten all about me, Willers thought sadly as father walked to his second son. Welcome back, Garland, my dear boy. Even though Whitegrove is your home now, Highgarden will always be happy to see you again, said father with a beaming smile. Highgarden will always have a special place in my heart, father, you know that, said Garland before hugging father and then hugging mother. It doesn't do to seem so upset, Will. Willers turned around to grandmother behind him. No. No, it doesn't, Willers agreed as he faced her. What troubles you now? Your father's stupid antics. They are a bore to me also, she said. No, it's personal, grandmother, he replied. Grandmother looked concerned as she heard him say that. What is it, she wondered. Willers sighed through his nose. There are times that I feel that father has become so obsessed with Loras becoming like Leo Longthorn and that he wishes he was his eldest son and heir, that and for Margaery to become the queen. Garland now has his own holding and is married to a kind and lovely young woman. But what is there for me? I'm just the crippled heir he hoped to turn into a great knight of legend, and that my only interests are in reading and with animals as opposed to more martial pursuits. Grandmother smiled sadly as she patted him on the shoulder. If you feel this way, then speak to him and to your mother, she said. Would they listen? He asked. Of course they will. Your father especially. He may be an oafish Moran like no other, but he loves his family. Willers, he loves you. He wants all of his children to be happy. But, you are right, it is high time that you were wed and to a good woman, she replied. Come inside, Garland. Let's talk in my solar, and then we can feast, and you both must rest after your long journey, father said as he put his hands on the shoulders of both his second son and his good daughter. Willers shook the hand of Garland when he saw him. Brother, I hope you didn't embarrass all of the competition in the tourney, said Willers. Gods, no, brother. That's for the boys of today, Garland replied. Willers walked with Garland, father, mother and grandmother upstairs to father's solar, whilst Leonette and Margaery drank tea in her chambers with their cousins Thalia Hightower, Desmara Redwine and Eleanor Tyrell. In father's solar, Willers sat beside father whilst Garland sat opposite father to give his report on the situation in King's Landing. "So, what news is there from the capital, Garland?" asked grandmother. "It's unusual, grandmother. The hand of the king is busying himself with fixing messes made by the king, such as the debts he owes to House Tyrell and House Lannister," he replied. "Ha, Tywin Lannister will gobble up all coin he can fetch from Eddard Stark's eagerness," muttered grandmother. Indeed, Willers thought as he remembered her telling him how the last of the gold and silver of the Westerlands had dried up in their mines. "And what of Lyanna Stark?" Mother asked. "She is perhaps one of the most beautiful women I've ever met in my life." "And that is no exaggeration," he replied. "Ah. Fuck. That's not good." Her nickname, the Star of the North, was not one bestowed upon her as an act of kindness by her parents then? Grandmother asked. "Absolutely not, grandmother. It barely does her any justice," said Garland. Father grimaced at hearing this. "But, surely not as striking or as beautiful as Margaery?" Father optimistically asked. "Father, if you had met her, you wouldn't doubt me. However, in spite of this setback, having met her and spoken to her personally, I think that we may just have a chance," said Garland. "What do you mean? What did you speak to her about?" asked Willers. "Just after her brother, Sir Brandon Stark, won the melee, I spoke with her and asked about her betrothal to the Crown Prince. She made it clear that she is not betrothed to him, they are simply courting. Apparently, her parents want their children to be wed to ones they love as opposed to having arranged marriages. They are clearly very good to their children if they would do that," Willers thought as he looked up at Father, whose face shone with hope. "Can you swear to that?" asked Father. "It was perfectly clear, Father. Her exact words were that her parents agreed to the match, but that they court for now and that no betrothal has been set in place," replied Garland. Father exhaled a large breath of air as he thought about what this meant. "Good. This is excellent news. Even if they are courting, it doesn't mean that Margaery's chances are over yet," Father said excitedly. "Then how will we introduce Margaery to Joffrey?" asked Mother. "We can use Loras and Renly. Stannis has long since left the capital since Jon Arryn's death. Renly can have Margaery meet Joffrey," suggested grandmother. "Yes, Mother. Yes, that's an excellent idea," Father said excitedly. Grandmother looked at Father before turning back to Willers. She gestured to him before she stood up. "Now, Garland. I think that you must be hungry from your journey," she said. "Famished, actually, grandmother," he replied as he stood up with Mother and Father. Before Father could leave, Willers spoke up. "Father, if I might have a word." Father turned to Willers, and looked surprised. "Of course, Willers," he said before sitting back down. Grandmother, Garland and Mother left the solar and grandmother closed the door behind her. "I need to get to the point," rather like the Northerners, ironically. "Why are you so focused on the futures of Loras and Margaery, but not of mine?" Whatever Father was expecting, it certainly wasn't this. "But, Willers, what is this? I've worked hard to learn how to be heir to Highgarden, to know how to treat with small folk, with our bannermen and with the capital. And yet, you are so determined that Loras be the greatest knight of the Seven Kingdoms and for Margaery to be queen. Garland is now Lord of Whitegrove and is wed to Leonette, a girl he treasures and adores. Loras has become the son you always wanted, which I could never be. Margaery has become the daughter you always envisioned would be the queen. But where am I in all of this? You haven't even tried to make any matches for me. I'm nearing my 25th name-a-day." Willers didn't enjoy raising his voice at Father, nor did he enjoy saying this. He could feel his eyes moisten as he spoke the last part, whilst Father looked shocked at how Willers felt. "Will, I am so sorry. I had no idea you felt this way." "Gods, I am sorry," he said before standing up and running to his side and hugging him. Willers smiled sadly as they hugged. "I am so sorry, Willers," he repeated as he pulled up a chair to face Willers. I promise that your mother and I will find you a good bride, one worthy of you and will love you for who you are," he said. Willers felt guilty when he could see Father's eyes moisten with tears. "Thank you, Father," said Willers before they hugged again. Ashura 9. Ashura was astonished at what she was hearing from her eldest daughter and her meetings with the Queen. Arya had just returned from a sparring lesson with Brandon and they were seated around the dining table in the Tower of the Hand. Ned looked exhausted as he drank from his wine cup and listened to Lyanna had been hearing from the Queen. It's easy to forget that not everyone is as wise or as clever as you, Ashura reminded herself as she listened to Cersei Lannister's reasoning. She actually said that it is weak to be charitable. Ashura exclaimed. Mother. She spoke as though she was paranoid of all around her, said Lyanna. Gods, I knew that Cersei Lannister was spiteful, cruel, insecure, obsessed with Lannister supremacy, mistrustful, always eager to please her father and plainly stupid. But even I didn't think she was paranoid to the point where she sees enemies in all corners of the room. And what of Joffrey? Have you seen him recently? Asked father. In passing, father. He decided to show off his newly arrived crossbow, a Mirish one. Painted red and decorated with golden imagery of Lannister lions, Lyanna replied, sounding bored as she said it. It used to be that boys and men would show off their swords to see whose was bigger, whose was sharper and whose had more beautiful crossguards. Now it's crossbows. But then Ashura remembered what Ned had discovered that Jon Arryn had uncovered, the truth of the parentage of Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen. Sooner or later, once Robert dies, Cersei will do all she can to ensure Joffrey is king and anyone whom is a threat is killed. And that includes us if she knows that we know. A good thing I advised Ned against confronting her. Ashura and Ned turned to Arya and to Brandon. And how are your lessons with the Kingsguard going, Bran? Asked Ashura. Excellent, mother. I was sparring with Sir Oswell and Sir Barristan today. I defeated Sir Oswell and managed to last a minute against Sir Barristan before he defeated me, he replied. A minute against Barristan the Bold. Gods, you have become a great warrior indeed, commented Ashura proudly. And what of your own sparring, Arya? Asked father. Brandon has taught me plenty, father. Does this mean I can be his squire? She asked. Brandon's squire? Are you sure, Arya? Being a squire is a hard task and one where you must always be at his side, said Ned. I am sure, father, she replied with certainty. Ned beamed at her before agreeing to it. I think she's been spending too much time with the Mormont sisters and the Sand Snakes. Sooner or later, if there ever came a war, which I pray to the gods it does not, she may demand to be fighting in it, Ashura thought nervously. Ned's own battles in the small council were stressing him to no end, Ashura hated to see as he ate some bread. Ned, I'm right here, she whispered as she rested her hand on his hand and leaned in and kissed him on his rough and bearded cheek. I know, Ash, he replied as he gripped her hand before lifting it up and kissing it. I'm just exhausted. I just want to be back home and never be in this fucking rat's nest ever again, he replied. I know, Ned, my love. I know, she whispered. What has been done now, in terms of the debts? She asked. The debts with the Lannisters and Tyrells is paid off. Though at great difficulty. The Master of Coin, Baelish, is a stickler with coin and many times tries to help with paying with coin, but I would not use coin which he has taken from his brothels nor wherever he fished out the mountains of gold he conjured up for Robert's exorbitant spending habits. With a little spending from House Stark's coffers, Ned had invested in selling iron and steel to the new kingdom of the Summer Isles and selling Crown Land's resources to various free cities, in particular wood from the Kingswood to free cities which had a lack in wood. In doing this personally, Ned had provided the Crown with the gold it needed to pay off the debts to the Lannisters and Tyrells. But there was still a large debt to be paid to the Iron Bank of Bravos. A debt of 5 million gold dragons. What of the debt to the Iron Bank? Asked Ashura. It's been paid. Though Varys has said that a representative of the Iron Bank is coming to King's Landing to speak to us on behalf of the debt, he replied. Why would they come if their debt has been paid? A knock on the door turned Ashura's attention away from her husband. Enter, said Ned. It was Sir Barristan Selmy. His hands were covered in blood. My lord Hand. The king. He is critically wounded. Critically wounded, Sir Barristan, he repeated. By the gods. Yes, my lord Hand. A giant boar we were hunting in the Kingswood, he explained. Ned turned to Ashura. She shook her head as he stood up. It is just as I thought. The moment that Robert is lying on his deathbed, the Lannisters are going to prepare for Joffrey to take the throne. We cannot be here for this. We must get out of the capital. Very well. I'll be down there as soon as I can, said Ned. Ned left, following after him. Ashura turned to Brandon. "Get Jory and Veon and bring them here now," she said. "Yes, mother," he replied before leaving. Ashura turned to Eliana and Arya. "Go and start packing your things," she ordered. "What? But why, mother?" asked Arya. "Because the king is dying, and when Joffrey takes the throne, the city will become a very dangerous place indeed. The Lannisters want to control everything and for all to swear fealty to Joffrey," said Ashura. "But he's the crown prince and will soon be king, mother," said Eliana. "Yes, but the Lannisters think anyone that isn't them are their enemies. We cannot be caught in the middle of this. It will put all of our lives in danger," Ashura explained. Still surprised and unsure, regardless they did as they were told. Brandon returned with Veon and Jory. "The king is dying. And when he breathes his last, we must be ready to leave the city in case the Lannisters, in a bout of madness, think us to be traitors," she said before she turned to Veon. "Gather all of our household and have them ready for leaving immediately," she ordered. "Aye, my lady," he replied before leaving. "Jory, prepare your men and have them stationed here and tell them to be wary of any soldiers, whether gold cloaks or red cloaks." "Aye, my lady," he replied before taking his leave. Now Ashura turned to her second son and third child. "Gather as many horses for our household as you can," she said. "Aye, mother." "But what will you be doing?" he asked. "I shall ride to Artos, to Riverrun, the Eyrie and Sunspear, before Cersei Lannister can tell any tall tales to them," she replied. As Brandon ran to do what he needed to, Ashura began to write letters, for Artos, Doran, Harold Arryn and for Hoster Tully. But whom will be king? Ashura wondered as she wrote the letter for Artos. Stannis? Or his son, Fortis? Gods, will Renly try and name himself king? Ashura finished the letters and began to walk to the Ravenry, hoping that Pycelle was attending to Robert's final moments. He was never a good king. No one can doubt his skill and tenacity as a warrior and a leader on the battlefield, but that was all he was good for. He may have been a good lord of Storm's End if he had stayed there, but a king, he was never born for it, nor raised for it. Ashura attached the letters to the legs of the ravens. "Guard." Ashura turned around to see a maidservant behind her, standing at the door. "Bernadette, isn't it? One of Cersei's obedient minions. Her Grace will have your head for daring to betray the crown," she said arrogantly, as though imagining what she would be rewarded with for catching her in the act of sending letters. "How is this betrayal when I am just sending letters to my sons in Winterfell? And the correct form of address is my lady," girl snapped Ashura as she tucked her hands behind her back, until her right hand was touching the hilt of her hidden dagger. A red cloak arrived at Bernadette's call. She was just trying to send letters secretly and try to betray the queen she accused, pointing a bony finger at Ashura. "Come quietly, my lady," he commanded as he drew his sword and looked lustfully at Ashura's and the outline of her breasts. "Try it." "Fine," said Ashura as she unsheathed her dagger as quietly as she could and tucked it into the sleeve of her dress. She walked toward the guard, whom grinned evilly, as if he wanted to have Ashura then and there. "You should have brought more men with you," Ashura thought as she waited until she was within striking distance of him. She took the dagger from her sleeve and sliced his throat. He dropped his sword and fell to his knees whilst clutching his bleeding throat as blood had splattered over Ashura and Bernadette. Bernadette stared in shock at Ashura's killing of the guard before Ashura turned to her. Before she could even try, Ashura forced the door shut. She pointed the dagger at Bernadette's throat. "Forgive me, my lady. I was only doing as I was bid by the queen. I will tell her nothing. I swear," she begged. "No, you won't. You made your choice," Ashura said as she drew her dagger from her neck. Bernadette's body slid down to the floor, her throat stabbed. Chapter 33, Grave News. Chapter Text. Interlude 11. Brandon Stark, Alexander Vlahos. Brandon returned 2 hours after being ordered by Mother to find enough horses for the Stark household. "Mother." Brandon called when he returned to the Tower of the Hand. "I'm here, Bran," he heard a reply. He turned around to see Mother walk from her and father's bedchambers. What Brandon found strange was how Mother was wearing a different dress. The dress she had been wearing before was a sky blue color, whereas this was a dress of lavender coloring. "Why the change in dress, Mother?" he asked. "I had to kill a red cloak and a spy," she replied. "What?" Mother just killed 2 people. Mother. It's alright, Brandon. I managed to try and make it look like they killed each other in a rape attempt, but now things are taking a dark turn, she replied. What do you mean? It was then that father returned. What's going on, Ash? Why are we being packed to leave? Ned, you know as well as I that Joffrey will be crowned soon. And when he is, nowhere in the capital will be safe for us. The moment that they try and arrest us, we will be ready to escape, she replied. Can someone please, by the old gods, tell me what in the 7 hells is going on? Brandon asked. Mother turned to father and nodded. Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen are bastards. Bastards born of incest between Cersei Lannister and the Kingslayer, he replied. What in the 7 fucking hells? Born of incest? How can you be so sure, father? Asked Brandon. I've been around the capital and seen the few bastards of the king, all have the black hair and blue eyes of the Baratheons. As does Robert, Stannis, Renly, Algerdus and Stannis' children. And in a book of the great houses of the realm, all Baratheons have black hair and blue eyes. But incest? Between the Queen and the Kingslayer? Asked Brandon, still shocked. Jon Arryn hinted as much in notes he had left behind in his desk. Just how close the twins of Tywin Lannister are, father added. Gods, what fucking madness has claimed these idiot Lannisters? Has the madness of the Iron Throne claimed Cersei and her offspring? Do they know that you know the truth, father? Asked Brandon. Not that I know of, but in a place such as the Red Keep, things rarely stay secret for long, mother said. Have you sent word to Artos? Father asked mother. I have. And to Hoster Tully, Harold Arryn and Doran. Our allies will soon know the truth, she replied. Once they try and stop us, where will we go? Asked Brandon. Riverrun. It's the closest place to here and the Tullys are our friends, father replied. Do we tell Lyanna and Arya? Asked mother. No, not yet. Robert has just died. And now the Lannisters are beginning to consolidate their control over the city, said father. Do we leave now then? Asked Brandon. We should. If we don't leave until later, we may never get the chance to leave again. And we have no ship to escape on, added mother. Brandon and mother turned to father, whom nodded. Where are Veon and Jory? He asked mother. Veon is getting our household ready to leave and Jory is mustering our guards to get ready to escape, she replied. Father turned to Brandon. Find them and bring them here. Yes, father, said Brandon before leaving the Tower of the Hand. Brandon kept a dagger sheathed inside his jerkin as he ran to find Veon and Jory. Veon was already making his way back to the Tower of the Hand. Have you all finished? Brandon asked. We have, my lord, he replied. Good, now get back to my parents at once, said Brandon. Yes, my lord. Brandon found Jory gathering the last of father's household troops. Lord Brandon, we are ready, said Jory. Good. Now get back to father. We may be leaving sooner than expected, said Brandon. Worry not, my lord. It'll take more than these Poncy Southerners to stop us, Jory assured him. They returned back to the Tower of the Hand and upon returning, Brandon saw father take off the badge of the Hand of the King. We've just heard that Joffrey has just been crowned king and Cersei is named Queen Regent, said father. Gods, that fucking spoiled little shit is king now. He and his mother both are a curse on the 7 kingdoms, Brandon thought as his nose stifled at the very news. Will they demand our fealty, father? Asked Brandon. They will. Which is why, I won't be going alone, said father. Father then turned to mother. Take her Lyanna, Arya and our household to the stables and have them saddle up and ready to leave when myself, Brandon and Jory return. Father, if we go, they will kill us, said Brandon. No, I know. This is just to distract them long enough for your mother to get everyone ready to leave. Our men will hold the stables. We 3 will go with 4 of Jory's best men. But we must be on guard for a trap, in case Cersei or her lickspittles have plotted such a thing when we arrive, said father. Father and Brandon wore armor underneath their northern boiled leathers and walked together to the throne room with Jory and Jory's men Horlis, Jax, Harwin and Quint. Brandon looked around the throne room, where he could see the red cloaks lining up the hall leading up to the Iron Throne, where the pretentious bastard Joffrey was sat, with his mother seated beside him on his right and Sandor Clegane stood to his left, and in front of him was the Kingsguard, including Uncle Arthur and the knights whom had been training him, such as Sir Barristan, Sir Oswell and Lord Commander Hightower. Deep breaths, Bran. Don't let these Poncy Southerners unnerve you. Steel yourself, Brandon thought as he reminded himself where his dagger was sheathed and where his axe was. His smaller axe, as opposed to his large one, but father intended to catch them by surprise, rather than let them see through whatever counter-attack they had. Lord Hand, you join us at a sad time, said Cersei Lannister. Indeed, your grace. Though, I regret to say that I am no longer able to serve as Hand of the King, he replied before holding up the pin and extending his arm out for one of the King's guard to take it. Sir Meryn, said the Lannister Pox, whom looked pleased that father was resigning from his post. Meryn Trant and Boros Blount. Neither of them deserved to be in the Kingsguard, Brandon thought as he regarded them with disgust, remembering all of the stories Uncle Arthur and Sir Barristan had told him about them. Meryn Trant took the pin and passed it to the usurping Queen Regent. You return to Winterfell, Lord Stark, she asked as she passed the pin to one of her servants. I do. To end this farce and let the world know the truth of this false king, born of incest between you and your brother, your grace. Father shouted. Cersei Lannister looked infuriated as she glared at them, and all red cloaks gathered drew their swords. Arrest them. Kill them all. The traitors. Joffrey screamed. Brandon looked to father and then to the way they came. He could see gold cloaks, led by Janos Slynt, march inside. I warned you not to trust me, Stark, a man with a taunting voice said. Brandon turned around to see the Master of Coin, Petyr Baelish, grin as looked at father and Brandon. Now. Get out of here. Father shouted. Brandon drew his axe and his dagger and sliced the throat of a red cloak as he came toward him with an outstretched arm. He swung his axe at the helm of another red cloak as he was drawing his sword. The blow bludgeoned the helm and dented into his skull, with blood and brains spilling out. Brandon turned around to see the Kingsguard draw swords and point at them, including Uncle Arthur. Uncle, don't do this. Boros Blount was the first to slice at Brandon. Brandon easily dodged the blow and beheaded him with one blow with his axe. He stabbed Meryn Trant in the throat with his dagger before taking the shield of a slain red cloak as he, father, Jory and their men ran towards the entrance. Brandon cut down 2 gold cloaks whom advanced towards them, and Jory eviscerated one and beheaded a second before father stabbed Eileen Payne in the belly. The commander of the gold cloaks fell to his knees after Jory sliced his belly open and proceeded to behead him. Brandon turned around to see the red cloaks being ordered to throw spears at them by Joffrey. Brandon held his shield up and felt a sharp blade cut his arm. He looked to see 4 spearheads impaling through his shield. Fucking spoiled, inbred shit. Come and get us yourself, Joffrey the Ill-Born. Or are you a coward? Brandon shouted for the room to hear. But then, he looked to see the Kingsguard run towards them, swords drawn. Kingsguard. Kill them. Kill them. Slaughter them. Joffrey screamed. But before they could attack them, with Jaime Lannister in the front, an armored fist connected to his face and pushed him far back, where he tripped over a slain red cloak and fell onto his back. You swore to defend the king. Instead, you cut his throat and left his queen, his good daughter and her children to die. Brandon looked to see the white bull, with a blooded gauntlet, wheeled around his beautiful bastard sword before he cut down 2 red cloaks with relative ease. They side with us. Why the fuck do they do that? Come. We must get out of here. Uncle Arthur shouted as he cut down 2 gold cloaks with one blow with his beautiful sword, Dawn. Agreed. We have oaths to fulfill and we aren't going to do that here, yelled Sir Oswell with a laugh before he stabbed a gold cloak officer in the guts. Go, brothers. Fulfill the oaths we swore, shouted Sir Gerald as he stayed behind, facing down 6 red cloaks. They ran outside through the main doors and ran towards the stables. Brandon was relieved to see Mother, Lyanna and Arya were all safe. Uncle Arthur. Why? Why did you come with us? Brandon asked. To fulfill the oaths we swore to the true king, not a Baratheon, nor an ill-born Lannister abomination, he replied fervently. Aegon. Artos 7. Artos walked to find Aegon playing with Ricard. Egon had assembled a small army of wooden warriors to face Rakard, but Rakard rammed a wooden figurine of a warrior and a direwolf straight into the center of Egon's army. "That's right, Rakard. You'll be a brilliant commander one day," smashing straight into the enemy's center said Egon as he beamed at his nephew. "Not only will you teach him to fight, but now you want to teach him to lead battles?" Artois asked. If he is to be Lord of Winterfell, he'll need to be a good one," replied Egon as they turned to Rakard. Rakard looked up at them both with a devious smile. "Such a naughty grin. Your Aunt Arya looked like the exact same when she was your age, little lad," Artois said before picking up Rakard. Hearing the door open behind them, Artois turned to see Rakard's mother join them, whilst holding Rakard's sister, Allmaria. "And how are my boys today?" Rhaenys asked as she looked at her brother, her husband and her son. "Well, Rakard has just been shown by his uncle Egon how to command a battle, by charging straight for the enemy's center," explained Artois. "Is that right, little Rakard? Did you have fun with Uncle Egon?" Rhaenys asked as she walked toward Artois holding Egon. In reply, Rakard grinned again. "I'll take that as a yes, my handsome little firewolf," said Rhaenys before she kissed Rakard's forehead. The three walked to Father Solar with Rakard and Allmaria. When they did, they saw Maester Jellimund and Aunt Elia already there. "My lord. A letter just arrived from your father," said Maester Jellimund. Artois passed Rakard to his grandmother, whom whispered to Rakard and passed him a tiny chunk of roasted fish, his favorite food. Artois opened the letter, not expecting the contents to be as they were. "Artois, my dear son. The news I am delivering to you is so dangerous that it threatens the stability of the already fragile realm. Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen are all born of incest between Cersei and Jaime Lannister. By the time that you receive this, Robert will be dead. He died as a result of being gutted by a large boar in a hunting incident. I know that the Lannisters have been plotting for this day and that the moment he breathes his last, that Joffrey would be sat on the throne. Hopefully, if all has gone according to plan, we will have escaped the capital and made our way to Riverrun. But the Lannisters will not take well our refusal to bend the knee to them. Call the banners and assemble them at Winterfell. As much as I never wanted this to come, a war as great as Robert's rebellion is erupting, and the North is at the centerfold of this. Good luck, Artois. May the old gods watch over you. We love you all and look forward to the day that we can see each other again, when this is all over. Love. Mother. Fucking seven hells, Artois thought as he reread the letter, desperate for the letter to be wrong. It wasn't, he hadn't misread it. Gods. Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen all bastards. And because father won't bow to the Lannisters, they will start a war over it. Artois inhaled as he put the letter down. Artois. My love. What's wrong? He looked up to see Rhaenys looking over him. He passed the letter to her. Robert Baratheon is dead. Egon and Aunt Elia all stood up and looked at him, hearing that news. How? Asked Aunt Elia. Gutted by a boar whilst hunting. But that's not the problem. The problem is that Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen aren't Robert's children. They are bastards of incest, and their true father is the Kingslayer. By the gods, Aunt Elia exclaimed as she took in the news, her eyes opened wide. Where is Uncle Ned? Asked Egon worriedly. If they managed to escape King's Landing they will have made their way to Riverrun for now. But, they expect the Lannisters to chase after them. Mother says for me to call the banners to Winterfell, said Artois. Daenerys 7. Are you sure? She asked. I am certain, my lady. You are with child, said Maester Coleman. I carry our child, Daenerys thought excitedly, overeager to bring the news to Harry. We will have such handsome and strong sons and beautiful and clever daughters. She turned to Sir Alisa, whom was beaming like a proud father to her before he helped her down from Maester Coleman's table. Do you know how many moons my lady will give birth in, Maester? Sir Alisa asked. I should think at the least, 6 moons, sir. At most, 7, he replied. Thank you, Maester, said Daenerys, almost shaking with excitement. Since the first night they had shared a bed together in love, as well as fulfilling their duties as Lord and Lady of the Eyrie, Daenerys and Harry would make love either once or twice a day. Daenerys' favorite was in the bathhouse, where she eagerly wanted to spare an hour with Harry on most nights, in the warm waters. She and Sir Alisa walked to find Harry. They found him in his solo with Lysa. "Dany," he said, happy at just seeing her. "This is just as I wanted. To have a wonderful marriage with a man I love and whom loves me," she thought. "I just have been to see Maester Coleman, Harry." "I am with child," she replied as she rested both hands on her belly. Harry stood up and walked to her. "You are?" he asked. To reply to this, Daenerys took hold of both hands and placed them on her belly. He said 6 to 7 moons, she said. Harry lifted his hands up and pulled Daenerys in and hugged her before kissing her. "Oh, this is wonderful, Dany. So wonderful," he said before kissing her again. "Congratulations, Harry." Dany said Lysa before she hugged Harry and kissed his forehead and then hugged Daenerys. A knock on the door disturbed them from their good news. "Enter," said Harry, his voice unmistakably happy as he looked up. It was Maester Coleman. "My lord, as well as offering my congratulations, 2 ravens have just arrived, from King's Landing," he said. "Ah, whom from?" asked Harry. "One is from the hand of the king and the other is from Cersei Lannister," he replied. "Uncle Ned. Is he all right?" What could have happened, Daenerys wondered as she thought about the last time she had seen the only father she had ever known in her life. Naturally, Harry took the letter from Uncle Ned first. He broke the seal and stared at the contents before sitting down. Daenerys felt nervous when she saw how the smile on his beautiful face dimmed into a sad and crestfallen grimace. "Harry. What's wrong?" Daenerys asked as she put one hand on his shoulder. "The king is dead," he said. "Robert the usurper is dead." "Good. Even if my brother and my father did wrong, he had no right to usurp my family from our rightful place nor treat Aegon, Rhaenys and myself as though we were evil and unrepentant criminals," she thought. "Did it say how he died?" asked Lysa as she and Daenerys sat down next to Harry. "He died in a hunting accident, it says. But then it says that Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen are bastards, born of incest between Cersei and Jaime Lannister, and that with Robert's death, there is a high chance of war," he replied. "What? Even if my ancestors practiced it, incest is disgusting and should never have been done in the first place. Obsession with pure bloodlines led to madness, a recurring trait in House Targaryen. Could this be true?" Maester Coleman asked. "Lord Stark is one of the most honorable men I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. He would never lie for the sake of power or wealth in matters such as this, my lord," said Sir Alisa. "I believe you, Sir Alisa. And I've been to King's Landing many times, when I was not a ward of the Royces, Red Forts and Waynwoods. The Queen and the Kingslayer were often very close to each other, many would see," said Harry. "What does this mean for the Vale?" asked Daenerys. "That depends on what the Lannister Queen Regent has to say," said Lysa before Harry took the second letter. Daenerys remembered the Lannister Queen and how furiously she had glared at her, at Rhaenys, at Aegon and especially at Elia. But Jaime Lannister, the man whom broke his oath and murdered her father, was kind to her. Aegon and Rhaenys, like the other knights whom had served in the Kingsguard in the final years of the Targaryen dynasty. "Maester, could you read the letter for us, please?" asked Harry. "Of course, my lord," he replied as he picked up the letter. Harry, Daenerys and Lysa studied the letter from Eddard Stark and thinking about its contents before Maester Coleman began. "To Sir Harold of House Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie, Defender of the Vale, Warden of the East. It is with sadness that I write of the death of our beloved king, my dearest husband, Robert Baratheon. The Crown Prince, Joffrey, has been crowned king. As a good and loyal vassal of the realm, you are called to King's Landing to swear fealty to his grace. But further news I have to announce is that the former hand of the king, Lord Eddard of House Stark, has seen fit to betray his grace, even after his daughter Elyana's betrothal to his grace. Eddard Stark attempted to overthrow the king and steal the throne for himself before he and his household escaped from the capital. They are being sheltered in Riverrun as the guests of House Tully. You are directed to lead the armies of the Vale and root out the traitors whom would dare to break faith with House Baratheon and crush the traitors of the Riverlands and the North. Aid in the bringing of justice to the realm and crushing all treason in the Riverlands and North, and his grace would reward you with gold, a position on the small council and a divorce from your arranged marriage to Daenerys Targaryen, for we know the marriage to her was unfairly forced upon you and we graciously permit you to wed the king's sister, the Princess Myrcella. Yours faithfully, Cersei Baratheon of the House Lannister. Queen Regent to Joffrey of House Baratheon. King of the Andals, of the Rhoynar and the First Men. Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. Protector of the realm. Daenerys was furious at the contents of the letter before Maester Coleman passed the letter to them. But Harry was incandescent with rage as he stared at the letter. That fucking bitch. She dares to assume I would make war on my family. And that I would divorce Dany, he shouted. Harry. Harry. Everything is okay. Just take a deep breath. It's all right, said his mother, hugging him gently, trying to calm him down. Harry inhaled before exhaling and looking at the letter again. Maester Coleman, call the banners of the Vale. We march for the Bloody Gate. Doubtless the banners of the North will respond to this and the banners of the Westerlands will march on the Riverlands, said Harry. War. Another war which will see the devastation of Westeros, Daenerys thought sadly, knowing that her loved ones, in Winterfell and in the Eyrie would be at the center of all this. Chapter 34, A Terrible Crime. Chapter text. Interlude 12, Jack Donnelly plays Jason, Media Center. Bryce Caron, Jack Donnelly. How much further is it? Bryce wondered as he sat atop his horse, looking around the landscape of the Stormlands. Bryce disliked traveling anywhere else in Westeros. He had been to Tourneys in the Crownlands, the Westerlands, the Reach and the Riverlands, but he never enjoyed being any of them. For the Lord of Nightsong, the Stormlands was the most beautiful place in Westeros. The great and powerful autumn storms battering the coastlines, the harsh mountainsides, the long and expansive rocky shores, the beautifully green Kingswood and the rainwood of Cape Wrath were all dearer to him than the bowers of the Reach, the gilded waters of the Westerlands or the beautiful sunny skies of Dawn. Though not as sun-kissed as Dawn or as the Reach, Bryce knew of no other lands which were as green or as magnificent as the Stormlands or was called home by the great Stormlander people. As Lord of the Marches, Bryce felt in an honor that it was his house which defended the Dornish marches from the Dornish, and from the Reachmen at times. Bryce had inherited the lordship of Nightsong and of House Caron when he was 6 after father, Lord Brian Caron, died of a terrible chill. Mother and his sisters, Alicia and Mila, also died of the chill. Since then, Bryce had dedicated himself to make father proud of him, by learning from his tutors and maesters and training hard in the tiltyard. In spite of Maester Cedric's efforts to get rid of his brother, Roland Storm, Bryce didn't want him to be removed from Nightsong, for he was his only family left. Because of the loyalty and love shared between the two brothers, Bryce had named him his heir whilst he was betrothed to Gwendis Wild, the youngest daughter of Lord Caspar Wild. Bryce now accompanied Renly and Stannis Baratheon through his lands as they were making their way to the lands of Titus Peak, Lord of Starpike, in the Reach. Brother, you need not fear about the Tyrells. What happened in the rebellion was years ago. And it is their help we need if we are to restore House Baratheon to the Iron Throne, said Renly. We shouldn't have to grovel on their lands for their support, Renly. They owe us their swords and their armies by right, snapped Stannis as they rode toward the March Road, which led from Nightsong to Starpike, across the marches in the Stormlands into the marches of the Reach. Stannis, you fail to realize that this is important. The Tyrells shall be our most important ally. With them on side, nothing can withstand our combined might, not even Tywin Lannister, said Renly. They will seek to make Fortis their puppet through Margaery Tyrell, angrily said Stannis. Fortis will have us both by his side, brother. Even Algerdus will be there when he finally comes around and shows his face, said Renly. Algerdus. Now there is a warrior all of the Stormlands will talk of for centuries to come, Bryce thought as he heard the most recent stories of Algerdus taking on the might of a massive Dothraki horde of 100,000 blood riders rampaging through Volantis. If we had Algerdus and Storm Company here, we would not need to beg for the scraps from Mace Tyrell's table, muttered Roland as they rode together. Yes. His daughter will be queen, and yet from what I've heard, he will just demand more and more, for his family and for his bannermen, said Bryce. I can see why you dislike the Game of Thrones, brother. There's too much ambition and too much politics that it never leads to anything good in the end, said Roland. That and so much more, brother, Bryce thought as they continued on the road. After the death of King Robert, Renly had acted as an arbiter between the Tyrells and Baratheons to ensure that Margaery Tyrell would marry the heir to Storm's End, Fortis Baratheon. But as the arguing Baratheon brothers rode ahead of the column in front, Bryce looked ahead at the oncoming copse of trees, obscuring the road ahead. Bryce reached for his sword, not knowing why. "Brother, what is it?" asked Roland. "I don't know. Something is wrong. I can feel it," Bryce replied. "What is it? Why is it that those trees are making my hairs stand on end? Are you sure that you're not afraid of the night as you used to be when we were little boys?" Roland jested. "Shut up, brother. This is serious." Bryce's senses heightened when he heard the sharp whistling of leaves from the trees, on a windless day, and at least 5 men groaning in pain as they fell from their horses. Bryce drew his sword when he saw arrows poking out of their bodies. "Ambush! Ambush! Take cover, everyone!" Bryce shouted. Bryce drew his shield and stared ahead at the woods, where the arrows came from. And then, just as Stannis drew his sword and urged Renly away, 2 knights rode toward them. One of the knights caught up to Renly and drew a beautiful long sword, grey as smoke, and with a heart-shaped ruby on the pommel. He grinned as he cut down the Lord of Dragonstone. "No! Renly!" Stannis screamed as he charged at his brother's murderer. But then he was pulled down from his horse by another knight, this one whose handsome face could be seen as unique, with his violet eyes and silver hair, with a black streak in it. This knight smirked as he stabbed Stannis with his own sword. "No! You murdering cunts!" Bryce wanted to fight and kill the murderers whom murdered his liege lord and his brother. But he was stayed when he felt Roland's hand on his sword arm. "We have to get out of here. They'll kill us if we try and fight them," he begged. He looked up to see Renly's killer, whom arrogantly waved his long brown hair around as he stared them down, riding closer at a slow pace, taunting them. "Retreat! Retreat!" he shouted. "To Storm's End." Bryce was furious that they couldn't bring their bodies back with them. "Run, you little fucking cowards! Run," said Stannis' murderer. Bryce led them away as they retreated back to Night Song. As they rode towards the Nightingale Gate, Bryce grabbed Roland by his shoulder. "Have everyone treated by Maester Cedric if needs be and have the lands scoured. Find those bastards and slaughter them. And bring Stannis and Renly's bodies here. They deserve to be buried in Storm's End," said Bryce. "Yes, brother." "But where are you going?" asked Roland. "I go to Storm's End and to personally bring the news of the murders to Lord Fortis and Lady Catelyn," he replied. "The poor lad. He's only 10 and he's lost his father and 2 of his uncles. And now he is to be Lord Paramount of the Stormlands. And still a claimant to the Iron Throne, one whom the Lannisters will want to murder, he and Lady Shireen both." Garland 3. Garland hated seeing Loras look so miserable as the Tyrells were seated around the table in Father's Solar. He had not been the same as he once had been after they had found the bodies of Renly and Stannis. "Can we still wed Margaery to Fortis Baratheon?" asked Father. "Mace, we have to be pragmatic about this. The Baratheons are finished. Their only capable leaders are long gone. Stannis and Renly are dead. And Algirdas is searching for glory and gold in Essos, not caring about his brothers or his homeland," said Grandmother. Garland patted Loras on the back at the very mention of Renly's name. "He'll be home soon, Loras." "Back where he belongs," Garland whispered. "He belonged with me," he glumly replied. "Yes, he did," Garland replied as he hugged him. "Then what alternative is there, Mother?" asked Mother. Grandmother rolled her eyes as she turned to Mother. "Dear, do not call me Mother. Do I look anything like the woman whom gave birth to you?" Grandmother sternly replied. "She's right, Grandmother, what alternative is there?" Willers wondered. Before she could reply, a knock on the door was heard. "My lord," asked Maester Lomis. "Enter, Maester," said Father. Maester Lomis opened the door and walked inside. "Lord Petter of House Baelish is here," he announced. "What? Why is the Master of Coin here? Littlefinger? Why is he here?" Loras demanded. "He insists he wants to speak to you, my Lord Tyrell, on behalf of Queen Regent Cersei Lannister," he replied. "Loras has spoken aplenty of how corrupt Littlefinger is." "Show him in," said Father. "Father, you cannot be serious. That man is a corrupt and dangerous man. Renly tried for years to have him removed from his post," Loras insisted. "Loras, that may be so, but we should first hear what he has to say," said Grandmother. Garland looked up to see Maester Lomis escort the Master of Coin inside Father Solar. "My Lord Tyrell, my thanks for granting me this audience," he said with a smarmy and annoying smile. From that smile alone, gods, I want to punch him, Garland thought as he looked at him. Loras felt the same, whom looked close to drawing his sword and killing him. "That's quite all right, Lord Baelish. Now, what brings you here, when war is taking place in the Riverlands?" asked Father. "Lord Tywin Lannister has made it clear that he will not tolerate any treachery in the reign of his grandson, King Joffrey. And yet, such treachery has been found in houses Stark, Tully and now Arryn. The Martells and Greyjoys have yet to make any move. And yet, it is strange that the Baratheons and the Tyrells were to meet on the borders between the lands of House Caron of Nightsong and House Peak of Starpike. Even if such a thing were true, how is it that you have heard of such things, Lord Baelish?" asked Grandmother, long before Father could say anything. "You are not the only one with spies in this land, my lady. Now, it is only a matter of time before Lord Lannister crushes the Starks, Tullys and Arryns, especially with reinforcements arriving.